Chapter 5042. Lin E rejoiced in his heart. This pair of man and woman were practically acting up to his doorstep. If it wasn't for the duo's provocation, he would be too embarrassed to take a step further. Now that things had turned out this way, even Lung Lung had chosen to acquiesce. Congratulations! The pair of man and woman were startled when they heard that. They had obviously lowered their voices, but they didn't expect Lin E and Lung Lung to hear it. Their gossiping behind someone's back was exposed in an instant. Both of their faces were burning. They hastily got up with an embarrassed expression and fled. The wind is strong here. Let's hurry up and get a room. Every minute of the night is worth 1,000 gold. The man even found an excuse for himself before he left. Annoying. The woman spat at him, but she still followed him obediently. After the duo had gone far away, Lung Lung struggled for a while and pulled her hand out from Lin Yi's hand. She said with a blushing face, "Don't you overthink it. I was just helping you to smooth things over just now. I didn't mean anything else." "Huh, thank you so much." Lin Yi couldn't help but look at her in amusement. The difference between Lung Lung's words and actions was huge. Could it be that she was the type that said she didn't want it, but her body was very honest? "No, you're welcome. Oh yeah, what do they mean by getting a room?" Lung Lung quickly changed the topic. "Getting a room? It means getting a room at a hotel." Lin Yi shrugged. "Why? Are they foreigners too? Judging from their accent, they're obviously locals. Locals should have a house to stay in. Why are they wasting money at a hotel?" Lung Lung couldn't help but wonder. Lin Yi choked for a moment. He didn't know how to explain to her at that moment. If he were to say it directly, he would be treated as a hooligan. He could only mumble, maybe it's not convenient for them to do it at home, so they can only find a place outside. That kind of thing can only be done by getting a room. That kind of thing? What kind of thing? Lung Lung couldn't react for a moment. It can't be done in public. It must be done secretly in a room. Isn't that kind of thing between a man and a woman? Lin Yi smiled bitterly. Something between a man and a woman? Lung Lung stared at the back of the two men in confusion. She recalled the man's last words of "every moment of the night is worth 1,000 gold." Only then did she finally understand. She blushed and spat. "Pervert. Actually, you can't say that. After all, it's a consensual thing. These days are not like the ancient times, where the barrier between men and women is not so serious." Lin Yi explained with a bitter smile. Nowadays, almost all couples would go and get a room. According to Kuld's logic, 99% of the young people were shameless and lewd. Really? The secular world is really chaotic. They don't even care about the most basic sense of propriety and honor. Lung Lung said indignantly. With her background in the immemorial martial world, it was really hard for her to imagine such a thing. This was the difference in outlook on life and the world. Lin Yi was speechless when he saw her expression. She was so indignant just because someone else was going to get a room. If he were to suggest it, wouldn't he be beaten to death by her? What's wrong? Are you also such a person? Lung Lung frowned and looked at him. Suddenly, she moved a step away like a frightened deer. She was afraid that she was right. No, we don't need to get a room. We definitely won't get a room. Let's go home directly." Lin Yi quickly waved his hand. "That's more like it." Lung Lung nodded. After a while, she realized that she had been fooled. She stared at Lin Yi with a blushing face and said, "I don't want to do that kind of thing with you. Don't let your imagination run wild." All right. We won't do it even if we go home. Is this okay?" Lin Yi had no choice but to raise his hands and surrender. He sounded like a strange uncle trying to abduct a little girl. "You're not serious at all," Lung Lung muttered helplessly. She did not know why there was a ripple in her heart. She could not calm down even when she walked back to the apartment. She couldn't help but blush when she recalled all the things that happened today. Strictly speaking, it was the first time that she had spent an entire day with a man, and from time to time, there were some intimate actions that she had never dared to imagine before. Was this what people in the secular world called a date? "Are you all right?" Lin Yi saw that her cheeks were so red that it was scary. He subconsciously reached out to check her temperature. He was shocked and said, "So hot? Do you have a fever?" No, I'm just a little tired. I'll go back first." Lung Lung was shocked, and quickly ran back to her room. How is this a fever? She was simply too engrossed in thinking about those things. That was why her face was red. A foundation establishment stage expert would be tired just from shopping? Even if it was excusable for her to be injured, there was no sign of it before this. Didn't this Lung Lung want more? Lin mumbled in confusion. He then returned to his room. Although he had already decided to pursue Lung Lung, his priority now was to recover his strength. He had already wasted the whole day today. He had to make up for the progress quickly. If he did not have enough strength, it would be futile even if he investigated the background of those Heaven Path experts. Lung Lung, who was next door, was distraught. She could not calm down and cultivate properly. It was her first time thinking about someone like this. Moreover, it was a man that she had not known for long. There were a few times when she wanted to put aside her distracting thoughts to cultivate and heal herself. However, Lin Yi's appearance would unconsciously appear in her mind. She could not extricate herself and could not get rid of it. What's wrong with me? Lung Lung was at a loss. She shook her head hard and clenched her teeth to soak herself in a cold bath. Only then did she feel slightly better. However, before she could cultivate in peace, she suddenly let out a muffled groan and fell to the ground. After a while, she struggled to get up. Her face was pale. After a few days of healing, her injuries were almost healed. She did not expect that it would relapse again like before. There was no end to it. After resting for a while, although her injuries did not show any signs of improvement, it did not further deteriorate to the point of no return. This was the silver lining in the misfortune. However, Lung Lung could not feel happy at all. In the beginning, she thought that it was just an ordinary injury. Even if the injury was a little more serious, as long as she drank the medicine and soaked in the medicinal bath, coupled with sufficient spiritual energy replenishment, she should be able to get through it. This was how she got through her injuries in the past. Even until the first relapse, she was still holding on to such a fluke in her heart. However, she had completely recognized the current situation now. Chapter 5043. If it was an existence like the ghostly thing, it would be a trivial matter to have one's primordial spirit injured. It could be done in a flash. However, the problem was that Lung Lung was only in the early stage of foundation building. Unless a cultivator of this level had cultivated a very special heart technique, they would usually be a blank in this aspect. Even if they knew that the source of the injury was in the primordial spirit, they would not be able to do anything about it. Fortunately, the person who attacked her only had a special cultivation method. He was not that strong himself. At most, he could only mix some dirty tricks with ordinary moves. Otherwise, if it was an expert like the ghostly thing whose primordial spirit was extremely powerful, she would be crushed by the primordial spirit directly. It would be impossible for her to stand here alive. Even so, Lung Lung's current situation was very tricky. There were only two ways to heal under such circumstances. Either a primordial spirit expert could remove the source of the injury for her, or she could rely on her own willpower and perseverance to forcefully suppress all the injuries in her body in a short period of time, without leaving any traces. She could then wait for her primordial spirit to heal itself in the remaining time. Lung Lung had no idea that there was a primordial spirit expert by her side. To her, the first method was simply a fool's dream. Hence, she could only choose the latter stupid method. However, the success rate of this method was not high. Even if she had 2 pieces of spiritual jade of the highest grade in her hand and did not have to worry about the lack of spiritual energy, it was still extremely difficult to forcefully suppress all the injuries in her body without leaving any traces. Otherwise, if it was easy to do so, she would not have had these 2 repeated attacks. There's no other choice. This is the only way. Lung Lung took a deep breath and immediately began to heal her injuries again. Although she was inevitably worried, this was the only way out. In fact, if she could have further contact with Lin Yi today, it would be easy for Lin Yi to find out about her injuries and heal her. Unfortunately, the only physical contact between the two of them was holding hands. Moreover, it was only for a short while. Even Lin Yi could not figure out the source of her injuries in a short period of time. It was undeniable that fate made fools of people. The next morning, Lin Yi sent Lung Lung breakfast as usual. As a result, before he could knock on the door, a group of people suddenly came up the stairs. They were all hooligans. It was obvious that they did not come with good intentions. However, the leader of the hooligans was the landlord, Boss Huang. Of course, Lin did not know who Boss Huang was. He had signed a contract with a real estate agent, so he had never seen the landlord before. Boss Huang did not know Lin Yi either, so he did not even spare a glance at Lin Yi, who was carrying breakfast. He brought his men and knocked on Lin Yi's room. "Are you looking for someone?" Lin Yi looked at this group of people in surprise. "Kid, mind your own business. If you don't have anything to say, then scram. We're here to collect our debts." A gangster at the side said in an unfriendly tone. "Collect debts?" Lin Yi was taken aback. "That's right. This family owes me a few $1,000,000. It's only right that they pay their debts." Boss Huang said. He was the landlord, yet he could say with certainty that he owed him a few $1,000,000. He looked like a victim who had suffered a lot. His acting skills were on par with those two swindlers. It cannot be helped. He had sent two groups of people to pretend to be ghosts, but there was no news from them. He could not wait any longer. The suite that Lin Yi and Cold stayed in were actually his houses. He was counting on these two houses to make a lot of money. How could he allow them to live in such a stable manner? Normally, as long as one was scared off, the other one would be scared off as well. But Lin Yi hadn't been scared off 2 times in a row. There hadn't been a single movement for half a month, and he couldn't help but feel anxious. Was this new guy really not afraid of ghosts? Since pretending to be a ghost was useless, he could only rely on a living person. Boss Huang had no choice but to do it himself. Not only was it risky, but the cost was also high. After all, he had to spend a lot of money to entertain this group of gangsters. However, in order to scare Lin Yi and Cold away and continue to make money, he had to go all out. "I'm sorry, but you've come to the wrong place. This house is now rented to me. The landlord is not here at all. I've never seen him before," Lin Yi said calmly. "What? He rented it to you?" Boss Huang looked at Lin Yi from head to toe. He thought to himself, this kid looks so ordinary. Why can't I scare him away? That's right. Please don't block my door. Everyone, please go back. Lin Yi curled his lips. "Stop playing dumb. I've come all the way here to collect the debt. Since that bastard isn't here, I'll have to reluctantly collect the debt from you. You're his tenant anyway, so you could just ask him for the money later." Boss Huang chuckled coldly. "Oh, this is the first time I've heard of such a debt collection method. Judging from your reaction, don't tell me you've been targeting me since the beginning?" Lin Yi said with a faint smile. No matter how good Boss Huang's acting skills were, he could not hide his sharp eyes. If he could not react in time, he would not be Lin Yi. "What did you say?" Boss Huang was startled. He quickly covered it up and said, "I know who you are. Who the hell would deal with an irrelevant stranger like you? Cut the crap. You just don't want to pay, right? Beat him up. Beat him up, and he'll be obedient." "No problem. Brother Huang, you have to reward us well after this." The gangsters were delighted. They had discussed it before they came. They were just there to support Boss Huang and scare him. But if they really beat him up, the price will be doubled. "Leave it to me." Boss Huang clenched his teeth. Of course, he did not want to spend the money. But no matter how good his acting skills were, there would still be flaws. It would be troublesome if the kids saw through his tricks. His scam of pretending to be a ghost purely relied on scaring people to earn money. Once it was exposed, it would be worthless, and he would not be able to earn a single cent in the future. Now that Lin Yi was suspicious of him, he had no other choice but to cut the Gordian knot. As long as he could successfully scare the kid away, he would be able to earn the money back in the blink of an eye. The group of gangsters immediately surrounded Lin Yi. Beating people up was a common occurrence for these gangsters, especially when a group of gangsters bullied a single person. Moreover, the person was an outsider with no local background. There was no risk at all, and the money was basically free. At that moment, Cold from next door had arrived at the door. She saw the scene through the peephole and was about to step forward to help Lin Yi out of the situation. After all, Lin Yi was just a normal person. He would definitely be at a disadvantage if he was outnumbered. Chapter 5044. Bullshit. I'll count to 3. If you return the money on behalf of the landlord, we'll talk. Otherwise, there are so many of us here. It's normal for us to accidentally kill someone. You better think about it. Boss Huang chuckled coldly and said 1, 2, 3. Before he could finish, he suddenly pressed his hand on Boss Huang's head without warning. Bang! Boss Huang's fat body fell to the ground with a loud thud. He groaned in pain and could not get up for a long time. Everything happened so suddenly that the gangsters jumped in fright. They looked at Lin Yi with a little more fear in their eyes. Boss Huang was at least 200 kilograms, and this guy was able to press him down so casually. How strong did he have to be to do that? What are you afraid of? There's only one kid here, and we have 6 brothers. We can kill him with a slap each, shouted the leader of the gangsters. He then launched a kick at Lin Yi. However, Lin Yi's kick was faster than him. While his leg was still in the air, it was snapped by Lin Yi's kick. His whole leg was bent at a terrifying angle and flew backward. He crashed into the fire cabinet behind him and fell to the ground on the spot. The gangsters were shocked again. They had yet to make a move, and 2 of their men were already lying on the ground. How troublesome. Let's go. Brothers, don't hold back anymore. There's so many of us. If we can't even take care of him, how are we going to show our faces in the future? The remaining 5 gangsters were furious. People who worked in the underworld cared about their reputation the most. Although they were a little anxious, they gritted their teeth and fought. They could not lose this fight because it would be embarrassing if they lost. Generally speaking, it was rare for an expert to kill someone in a fight. On the contrary, it was a fight between gangsters who knew nothing about martial arts that could easily lead to death because they had no sense of propriety and were usually armed. The 5 of them pulled out a steel pipe at the same time and swung it at Lin Yi's head without hesitation. Lung, who was hiding in the house and watching the show, was shocked when she saw the situation. Fighting like this could really kill someone. She didn't hesitate to make a move, but she didn't expect Lin Yi to be faster than her. Before the steel pipes of the 5 hooligans could land, he took the initiative to step on each of them heavily. Their feet were forcefully deformed. An earth-shattering sound of a pig being slaughtered was heard. The 5 gangsters threw away the steel pipes at the same time. Each of them hugged their feet and cried for their parents. The scene was heartbreaking, and anyone who saw it would shed tears. What are you waiting for? Do you want me to give one more kick to each of you? Lin Yi looked at them condescendingly. Boss Huang and the others did not even dare to let out a fart. They immediately covered their heads and scurried down the stairs. If they still could not react in time and encountered a ruthless person, they would not be able to live anymore. The group of gangsters screamed all the way out of the gate of the residential area. When they saw that Lin Yi did not chase after them, they finally breathed a sigh of relief. Each of them looked at Boss Huang with a bitter face. Was this the motherfucking soft persimmon that he said would deflate with just a pinch? Don't look at me. I didn't know this kid was so ruthless. If he really wanted to trick you guys, would I still be here to be beaten up today? Boss Huang grumbled. He finally understood now. No wonder the 2 groups of gangsters could not scare this kid away when they pretended to be ghosts. His moves were fast and ruthless. He was obviously not an ordinary person. It seemed like it would not be easy to find someone to deal with this kid unless they paid a huge price. However, Boss Huang was not a little gangster with a one-track mind. He was a businessman. He would not do this kind of obviously unprofitable business. He might as well wait until the kid's rent was due. He did not care if the kid was ruthless or not. When the time came, he would not have to rent the house anymore. At the same time, Lung walked out of the door. She looked up and down at Lin Yi again. She clicked her tongue in surprise and said, "It seems like you didn't lie to me. You're really good at fighting." "Of course, I told you a long time ago that I'm a willing master. These gangsters are nothing to me," Lin Yi said with a laugh. "You're bragging." Lung could not help but laugh. Although Lin Yi's moves were clean and quick, she thought that he was just an ordinary person. She could only say that Lin Yi's reflexes were above ordinary people. The martial arts master was just a joke. Lin Yi did not explain. He handed her the breakfast he bought earlier and said, "Here, eat it while it's hot." "Okay." Lung took the breakfast naturally. After a while, she suddenly realized that Lin Yi seemed to have been carrying the breakfast. He fought 7 people in the blink of an eye, but he did not even spill a bit of the soy milk. This did not seem to be something that ordinary people could do, right? What's wrong? Lin Yi looked at her strangely. Oh, nothing. Lung Lung smiled. The thought flashed in her mind. They had known each other for a long time. She did not believe that Lin Yi was a cultivator. She must be thinking too much. All right, I'll go back first. Do you want to go out for lunch? I'll call you. Lin Yi suggested. Lung Lung nodded. Before she closed the door, she deliberately reminded, don't knock on the door. Make a phone call. Okay. Lin Yi did not know whether to laugh or cry. Ever since she bought the mobile phone, this little cold girl was addicted to playing with a mobile phone. They were living next door, but she still insisted on making a phone call. However, this was not bad. When he was in a good mood, he could have a long talk with her on the phone. Their relationship had progressed by leaps and bounds. Lin Yi could not ask for more. However, Lung Lung on the other side was in a dilemma. On one hand, she could not help but develop in this direction involuntarily. On the other hand, she was afraid that she would sink deeper and deeper until she could not extricate herself. Her rationality told her that she could not go on like this. Her relationship with Lin Yi was destined to be fruitless. The deeper she sank now, the deeper she would be hurt in the future. It was not a good thing for both of them. There were a few times when she wanted to make it clear to Lin Yi face to face. However, every time she saw Lin Yi, the words that she had thought of beforehand would be thrown to the back of Java. Every time she was with Lin Yi, she felt relaxed and happy. She really could not bear to tear everything apart with her own hands. However, it was not a solution to go on like this. When it was late at night, Lung Lung finally made up her mind. The reason why she had been delaying it was not because she could not bear to say it to him face to face. The more important reason was actually herself. It was because her injuries had not fully healed that she had the excuse to keep delaying it. She always thought that it would not be too late to make it clear to Lin Yi when her injuries were fully healed. However, she was just deceiving herself. If this went on, even if her injuries were fully healed one day, how could she guarantee that she would be able to say it out when the roots of her feelings were deeply planted? Chapter 5045. She decided to use the 2 pieces of highest grade spiritual jade in her hands and the medicinal liquid to heal her wounds. She would either succeed or die trying. She could not drag it any longer no matter what. Strictly speaking, her train of thought itself could not be considered wrong. After all, her injuries were not ordinary. If she continued to heal herself step by step like before, the chances of a full recovery in a short period of time were very slim. Only by going all out and betting everything on one throw would she have a chance. It was a pity that she had forgotten something that was sufficient to bring about a calamity of annihilation. What's the little cold girl doing? Although Lin Yi did not use his divine sense to explore the movement next door, he was very sensitive to spiritual energy. The result of Lung Lung's desperate attempt was the overflow of spiritual energy. With such a strong fluctuation of spiritual energy, not to mention that he was next door, he could sense it clearly even if he was 10 miles away. Ordinary people would not feel anything wrong. At most, they would feel inexplicably refreshed. Even ordinary cultivators would have a hard time noticing anything. However, the problem was that the secular world was different from the past. There might be other cultivators of Heaven Path nearby. Even if their senses were not as sharp as Lin Yi's, if they did not have any reaction to such a strong fluctuation of spiritual energy, then their 5 senses must have been sealed. From Lin Yi's point of view, Lung Lung's sudden action was tantamount to taking a risk. If the nearby Heaven Path cultivators were to be attracted during the healing process, the consequences would be unimaginable. However, since Lung Lung had already done so, it was impossible for Lin Yi to stop her. If the healing process was forcefully interrupted, the consequences would be equally serious. The only thing he could do now was to release his divine sense to guard the little cold girl. At the same time, he was prepared for the worst, just in case. Time passed by slowly. The first half of the night was peaceful. Unexpectedly, when it was almost dawn, Lin Yi suddenly frowned. His divine sense clearly sensed that there were two people rushing towards his direction quickly. Moreover, these two people were familiar faces. They were Sun Baimei and Fei Yangsheng, who were hunting him last time. These two people had obviously sensed the strange fluctuation of spiritual energy here. That was why they came straight here. Moreover, both of them were extremely fast. He had no chance to escape with Lung at this time, even if he wanted to. Interrupting the healing process required a process. Moreover, it would be troublesome to explain their identities since they had not exposed each other. By that time, these two people would have already come for them. In a hurry, Lin could not care so much. He directly used his divine sense to inform Lung, someone is coming. At this moment, Lung's healing had reached the final stage. She was about to succeed. She believed that as long as she could remove all the injuries on her body, she could guarantee that there would be no relapse. However, at this moment, Lin Yi's voice suddenly rang in her mind. Am I hallucinating? Lung's first reaction was not surprise. Instead, she blushed inexplicably. She thought that she had sunk too deep into it, causing her to hallucinate. However, despite her doubts, she inevitably recovered from her meditative state. Although she was not like Lin Yi, who could easily cover the entire district with his divine sense, she would definitely be able to notice if there was any unusual movement in this apartment building. After sensing the aura of Sun Baimei and Fei Yangsheng, she suddenly turned pale with fright. At this time, she could not care about the healing process anymore. She could not care about why she was hallucinating for no reason. The only thing she could do was to quickly get up and put on her clothes. At the same time, she stomped her feet unwillingly. She was so close to being healed, but in the end, it was all for naught. After entering the apartment building, Sun Baimei and Fei Yangsheng rushed straight into Lung's room without hesitation. Lin Yi was observing everything with his divine sense in the next room. At the same time, he was secretly preparing himself. Although Lin Yi had deduced that these two people were attracted by Lung, he could not help but worry that his identity would be exposed after the previous battle. If that was the case, he would be in deep trouble today. Now he had more leeway to operate in the dark, so he would not be in a passive position. More importantly, this sudden accident had given him a chance to figure out the origin and intention of these Heaven Dao experts. If he was right, Lung and these two people should come from the same place. Moreover, they most likely knew each other. Therefore, as long as he listened to their conversation, he might be able to find the answer directly if he was lucky. As expected, Sun Baimei and Fei Yangsheng did not attack Lung after they forced their way into her room. Instead, they showed a surprised expression. It's really you, Miss Lung. We meet again, Sun Baimei sneered. Although Fei Yangsheng did not say a word, he went behind Lung and blocked her way of retreat. The two of them surrounded her from the front and back. It was obvious that they did not come with good intentions. This development surprised Lin Yi. Although he had guessed that they most likely knew each other, he did not expect them to have such an irreconcilable relationship. Looking at the situation, it was obvious that Lung had a feud with these two people. Sun Baimei, I haven't settled the score with you for hurting me last time. Are you trying to silence me again this time? Lung was carefully watching out for the two people's every move. She had forcefully interrupted her healing earlier. If she were to attack recklessly, she might cause a backlash. Therefore, she had to find a way to delay her recovery. Otherwise, she would have run away long ago. No, I've never thought of silencing you. Miss Ling knows how I feel about you. I actually just want to marry you. Considering that I've been pursuing you for so many years, don't tell me Miss Lung doesn't have anything to say? Sun Baimei pretended to be affectionate. Infatuation? You shameless bastard, you're really thick-skinned. I accidentally let you see the treasure that my master gave me. You covet it and want to kill me. You call this infatuation? Lung snorted disdainfully. Speaking of this, she felt some regret. Sun Baimei had indeed chased after her for many years. Although she had never felt anything, she had unknowingly let down her guard when she came out to the secular world to train. Sun Bai Mei had even coveted her treasure, which led to a fatal disaster. If she hadn't escaped fast enough, she would have died last time. Miss Lung, you've misunderstood. Haven't you heard of the saying, if you marry a chicken, follow the chicken? As long as Miss Lung becomes my cultivation companion, your things will naturally become my things. I might as well take care of that thing for you. Isn't it safer this way? What do you think? Sun Bai Mei said sincerely. Even if I die, I won't become your cultivation companion. You should just give up, Lung Lung said in a deep voice. Chapter 5046. Dream on. Lung Lung gritted her teeth and said angrily. This was given to her by her master. She would rather die than give it to a despicable and shameless person like Sun Bai Mei. Miss Lung, I thought that after so many days, you would have thought it through. Why are you still so stubborn? Don't tell me you haven't learned enough from the previous lesson. It doesn't feel good to be hurt by my heaven and earth arrow, does it? Sun Bai Mei's face showed that he had everything under control. He sneered and said, You were able to escape last time because I was kind to you. However, this kind of thing can't be repeated. No matter how kind I am, I won't let you go again. Even if I agree, Brother Fei won't agree. Brother Sun, since she won't listen to you no matter what, why are you still talking nonsense with her? In my opinion, why don't you just take action directly, so that she won't delay any more time? Fei Yangxing frowned and said, There were many experts who came to the secular world for training this time. He and Sun Bai Mei might not be the only ones who were active in the vicinity. If other people were attracted here, it would be troublesome. They might not be able to laugh in the end. Look, compared to Brother Fei, don't you think I'm already very easy to talk to? Sun Bai Mei pretended to be kind and spread out his hands. He began to give an ultimatum and said, Miss Lung, this is your last chance. Hand over the item and you can live. Otherwise, you can only report to the underworld. Of course, the item will fall into my hands in the end. I just need to search your body. Why don't you think about it again? Humph, I won't hand over the item to you even if I die. At most, I will destroy it myself. No one can get it. Lung Lung was ready to fight to the death. Ha ha, Miss Lung, you can fool a kid with your words, but don't you think you're lying to me? What kind of treasure is that? How can it be destroyed so easily? In the time it took you to destroy that thing, I would have killed you 10 times over. Since you don't know what's good for you, I have nothing else to say. It's a pity that such an icy beauty will be turned into a sieve by my cosmos arrow. What waste, Sun Bai Mei said as he prepared to attack. Although Lung Lung had been prepared since the beginning, she was still a little flustered at this moment. It was fine for her to die, but she was afraid that she would disturb Lin Yi next door. Once they made a move, the commotion would definitely not be small. What if Lin Yi came over to help out of kindness? Even if Lin Yi hadn't knocked on the door, at such a close distance, he might have been accidentally killed. Wouldn't that mean that she had caused Lin Yi's death? He was obviously just an ordinary person in the secular world, but unknowingly, he had occupied a significant position in her heart. No matter what happened, she would subconsciously think of him. Unfortunately, Cold noticed all of this too late. At this moment, Fei Yangsheng suddenly said, If Brother Sun doesn't mind, why don't you let me vent my anger before killing her? It's rare to meet such a superb beauty. I can't let this enchanting figure go to waste, right? I've seen so many disciples of the sect chasing after her. I've been drooling over her for a long time too. Oh, since Brother Sun has this kind of interest, then I'll let you have her. I'll just take the thing. There are so many women anyway, Sun Bai Mei said indifferently. Shameless beast. Lung Lung was trembling with anger. She wanted to fight to the death with these two people. However, for the sake of Lin Yi, she forced herself to retain some rationality. She said in a low voice, This is the residential area of the secular world. If you want to fight, go to a place where there's no one around. Otherwise, at least half of the people in this community will die. If things get out of hand, it won't be a good thing for both of you, right? Sun Bai Mei and Fei Yangxing looked at each other. The most important rule when they came out for training was not to disturb the order of the secular world. If both of them killed a large number of ordinary people here, there was nothing to be afraid of in the secular world. However, It will be troublesome when they return to the ancient underworld. This kind of thing would definitely be investigated to the end. All right, then let's talk outside. However, I advise you not to think that you can take the opportunity to escape. You're only at the early stage of the foundation building realm. You have no chance against the both of us. Moreover, you're still injured, Sun Bai sneered. Then let's go to the small forest outside. That place suits my taste. Fei Yangsheng smiled lecherously. He knew that it was impossible for Sun Bai to let him have the thing. Therefore, he could only find some psychological comfort from Lung Lung. All right. Lung Lung suppressed her anger and walked toward the door. Sun Bai and Fei Yangsheng were not afraid that she would escape because there was no way she could escape from their palms. However, before Lung Lung could open the door opened by itself. A head popped in from the outside. What happened? Do you need my help? Sun Bai and Fei Yangsheng were shocked. All their attention was on Lung Lung. They did not know that someone had come to the door without a sound. However, they were only shocked for a moment. Although they dare not make a big fuss, it was not a problem for them to kill a few people. As long as they were clean, everything would be fine. However, Lung Lung was dumbfounded because the person was Lin Yi. I saw that your door was broken, so I opened it without permission. Is everything all right? Lin Yi pretended to be confused. At the same time, he glanced at Sun Bai and Fei Yangsheng discreetly. From the moment he discovered these two people, he had started to prepare a vital energy bomb. After all, one of them was in the later stage of foundation building, while the other was in the middle stage of foundation building. They were not easy to deal with. It had been half a month since his primordial spirit was projected here. Lin Yi's strength had only recovered to the peak of the early stage of foundation building. Of course, if he was here with his real body, he could kill these two idiots in a second with his strength alone. Killing someone with a higher cultivation level was just a piece of cake for him. However, the problem was that he was in the primordial spirit form now. He did not have the confidence to win if they were to fight. Therefore, for the sake of safety, Lin Yi could only choose to prepare a vital energy bomb. This way, he could at least ensure that he would not be at a disadvantage. Fortunately, Lung Lung had bought him some time. Otherwise, he might not be able to make it in time if both parties were to fight as soon as they entered the door. I'm fine. You should go back now. Lung Lung was so scared that her face turned pale. She quickly pushed Lin Yi out of the room. This was what she was worried about the most. She did not expect it to happen. I'm fine. Are you kidding me? Even the door has been broken by someone. How can you say that you're fine? Lin Yi was still looking at Sun Bai and Fei Yangsheng suspiciously. His behavior was no different from an ordinary person in the secular world. Chapter 5047. As a matter of fact, although these people were all foundation building experts, Sun Bai was the only one who could recognize Lin Yi. The rest of them could not tell that he was a primordial spirit. Even Sun Bai, who had a special mental cultivation method, would not be able to react if he did not check on purpose. Their attention was focused on Lung Lung at the moment. They would not check on Lin Yi, who was an ordinary person who had nothing to do with them. I'm really fine. You should go back now. Lung Lung tried to push Lin Yi out forcefully as she spoke. However, to her surprise, she couldn't move him at all. She was a master in the early stage of foundation building, and she had used quite a bit of strength. How could she not move a normal person like Lin Yi? Don't worry. I'll protect you. Lin Yi grinned and pointed at Sun Bai and Fei Yangsheng. These two are robbers, right? Watch me beat them to death. I'll show you my past glory. Although I'm not as powerful as I was back then, it's more than enough to kill these two fools. Lung Lung was about to cry when she heard that. She quickly begged, stop fooling around. Go back now. I'm really fine here. Humph, since you're here, don't leave. Sun Bai was not far from them at the moment. He was about to kill Lin Yi as he spoke. With his strength, killing an ordinary person was easier than stepping on an ant. Although it did not matter to him whether Lin Yi was dead or not, this brat deserved it since he barged in. Lung Lung panicked when she saw that. She quickly used her body to block Lin Yi. However, Lin Yi took the opportunity to pull her out of the door. At the same time, He threw out a ball of terrifying vital energy. Because they were too close and it happened so suddenly, Sun Bai did not even have time to react. The vital energy bomb hit his face directly. After the previous fight, he was most afraid of Sun Bai. This guy was like a natural enemy to his primordial spirit. The vital energy bomb was specially prepared for him. As long as he could kill this guy first, everything else would be fine. Boom! With a loud bang, the true energy bomb directly exploded on Sun Bai's face. Although it hadn't been condensed for a long time and the power wasn't that strong, the lethality was still extraordinary at such a close distance. Sun Bai was directly blown away from the window behind him. Luckily, this guy was careless and underestimated his opponent. Otherwise, with his foundation establishment late-stage strength, even if he couldn't completely escape, he would at least be able to escape a certain distance. That would be troublesome. He secretly let out a sigh of relief. This was the drawback of the Jinqi bomb. Although it could be powerful as long as there was enough time to prepare, it was not as fast as the Thunder Burial bomb, which was unavoidable, and it was not as easy to control as the 5 elements and 8 trigrams, which could even evolve its own intelligence. Once it was thrown out, it would definitely explode. However, if the opponent reacted fast enough, it could easily miss. Therefore, this could only be regarded as an unexpected killer move at most. It cannot be a real trump card. The higher the level, the less effective it would be. As a result, he had gradually stopped using it when he was on Heaven Stage Island. However, the current situation was special. Let alone the Thunder Burial and the 5 elements and 8 trigrams, he couldn't even use a move like the 1,000 Thunder Explosion. He could only rely on the Vital Energy Bomb that was combined with the Alchemic Fire to turn the situation around. He had no other choice. Everything was within Lin Yi's calculations. However, the other 2 people who were still present at the scene were completely stunned. Long had been living with him for more than half a month and had always treated him as an ordinary person. Who would have thought that Yi would blow up Sun Bai, who was in the Foundation establishment late stage? Even so, Lung still didn't think of Yi as a cultivator. Her first reaction was that it couldn't be some kind of high technology from a secular world, could it? She had heard from Yi that the bombs from the secular world were extraordinarily powerful. Perhaps even cultivators like them couldn't handle it. Lung couldn't react to it, but Fei Yangsheng, who was on the other side, did. Although he couldn't recognize Yi just now, and he couldn't differentiate the primordial spirit like Sun Bai, he had suffered a loss from the vital energy bomb last time. It was impossible for him to not recognize him after only half a month had passed. Moreover, Yi's silhouette was very similar to the primordial spirit's silhouette. It was only natural for him to associate Yi with that. Yi knew something was wrong when he saw Fei Yangsheng's expression. He didn't give Fei Yangsheng a chance to speak and immediately pounced on him with a set of Raging Fire 8 trigrams palm. This person must die today. Although he was only a primordial spirit at the peak of the early stage of the foundation building realm, he couldn't fight an opponent who was a level higher than him as he used to. However, his opponent was only a mid-stage foundation building realm expert. He still had a high chance of winning if he fought him one-on-one. In the blink of an eye, Yi and Fei Yangsheng were already in a mess of battle. Lung finally reacted. Her expression was extremely shocked and incredulous. She would never have thought that Yi, who she had been with for half a month, was actually a foundation-building realm expert. Although there were quite a number of people who came out from the small primordial Jianghu this time. Even if it was impossible for her to know all of them, she should have at least met them once. She would more or less have some impression of each other. After all, they had set off to the secular world together. At least Lung was certain that Yi was definitely not someone from the small primordial Jianghu. However, since he wasn't from the small primordial Jianghu, he must be a local cultivator in the secular world. Could it be that there were heavenly path experts among them? This was completely different from what she had said before. While Lung was distracted, Yi and Fei Yangsheng were fighting fast. After a few short exchanges, the winner was decided. Fei Yangsheng, who was in the mid-stage of the foundation building realm, was beaten until he vomited blood. However, Lin Yi paid the price as well. At this moment, he had quite a number of injuries on his body. In order to kill Fei Yangsheng as soon as possible, he had risked exchanging injuries with his opponent. Of course, this was exchanging serious injuries with the space of the jade pendant as a backup. It was not unacceptable. Bang! Fei Yangsheng suffered another 1,000 frenzied kicks in the blink of an eye. He hung upside down on the wall, looking like a human mural. He couldn't move for a long time. The winner has been decided. Lin Yi immediately went forward to finish him off. Although his opponent had no strength to fight back, now was not the time to be merciful. Once the news that he was a primordial spirit was spread to the other heavenly path experts, there would be endless troubles in the future. Who knew if there was someone like Bai Mei's son among them? Lung Lung stared blankly at the scene without any reaction. Her heart was still in turmoil. She couldn't accept the fact that Lin Yi was a foundation-building realm expert. Chapter 5048. Don't kill me. Fei Yangsheng was scared out of his wits when he saw Lin Yi approaching him step by step. It was difficult for him to move normally due to his injuries. It was impossible for him to escape from Lin Yi. Lin Yi ignored him. He raised his hand and threw a mad fire 8 trigram palm his face. Fei Yangsheng would die without a doubt if nothing went wrong. Unexpectedly, Lung Lung suddenly shouted, "Watch out." Before her voice died away, a sharp black arrow was shot into the room from the door at a strange speed. Its target was Lin Yi, who was about to kill Fei Yangsheng. The black arrow came too abruptly. Fortunately, Lin Yi had received the warning from the jade pendant before Lung Lung's warning. He used the vital energy jet technique to shift his body away. Otherwise, he would have been hit. "Wow, you primordial spirit. I finally found you. How dare you sneak attack me in front of me? Today will be the day you die." Bai Mei's son yelled as he rushed into the room in a sorry state. Lin Yi's heart skipped a beat. His vital energy bomb exploded on his face, and he fell from the 5th floor. How could he not be killed? This guy's vitality was really tenacious. He was much harder to deal with than the average foundation building realm expert. "What did you say? He's a primordial spirit?" Lung Lung was shocked once again. The reminder from Lin Yi just now suddenly flashed across her mind. It turned out that it was real, and she wasn't hallucinating. This guy was indeed not a normal person. Of course, he's a primordial spirit. However, he's not even a fart. In front of me, any primordial spirit is just food for me to devour. Bai Mei's son laughed. Although he had suffered quite a heavy injury, it did not change the fact that he was the natural enemy of primordial spirits. All primordial spirits were helpless lambs in front of him, but he was destined to be an extremely vicious wolf. As he spoke, Son Bai Mei suddenly raised his huge sleeve, and an unparalleled suction force came from within. This move specialized in restraining primordial spirits and other spiritual objects. Even though Lin Yi's strength was a lot stronger than it was half a month ago, he still felt a little unsteady at this moment and almost fell in his son Bai Mei's hands. This kind of overwhelming restraint was very troublesome. Even Lin Yi could not think of an effective way to deal with it. His primordial spirit's ability to fight enemies of a higher level than his main body was originally inferior. Now that his opponent was a natural enemy that specialized in restraining spiritual objects, he had almost no chance of winning against a late foundation building cultivator as a peak early stage foundation building cultivator. Fortunately, Lin Yi had taken the initiative to use the Jinshi bomb against the other party. Otherwise, there was no way he would have fought the other party head-on. Instead, he would have turned tail and fled like the last time. Using the same trick as before, Lin Yi flicked his wrist and sent out a bolt of lightning in an attempt to interrupt the other party. Last time, other than using a Jinshi bomb, he had relied on this move to escape successfully. Unexpectedly, Son Bai Mei was already prepared for this. A plastic board had appeared in his hand. The power of lightning was not strong, and it could not penetrate the thick plastic board at all. When it hit the surface, there was no reaction at all. Wahaha! Insignificant trick! You stupid primordial spirit. Do you think I will fall for the same trick a second time? I've already caught people in the secular world and asked them, as long as you use this to block, no lightning will work. Sun Baimei said proudly. He was determined to get Lin Yi's primordial spirit, and he had specially researched countermeasures. One of them was how to deal with lightning. Although this move was not very powerful and could only numb the body for a moment, it was enough to interrupt his moves. It was impossible to defend against it. He didn't know what to do at first, but electricity was too widely used in the common world. Basically, as long as there were people, there would be electricity. He just had to grab a random person and ask them, and they would know how to deal with an electric shock. It wasn't hard for him to defend against Lin Yi's lightning attack. Seeing this, Lin Yi immediately complained. He had just tricked the other party with the Jinchi bomb, but he did not expect the other party to trick him back in the blink of an eye. Moreover, the other party only used a plastic board that could be found everywhere on the street. In his shock, his whole body was instantly sucked in. I've said before, anything that I fancy will never escape from the palm of my hand. Sun Baimei laughed excitedly. As long as he could swallow this abnormally powerful primordial spirit, he could directly break through to the gold core. This was something that he had always dreamed of. Don't even think about it. At this moment, Lung Lung finally reacted. She did not care about her internal injuries and rushed to help. At this moment, her position was not far from Sun Baimei, who was at the door. She turned around and swept her leg across. No matter why Lin Yi was hiding it, and no matter why Lin Yi was trying to get close to her, compared to Sun Baimei and Fei Yangsheng, Lin Yi was obviously a friend and not a foe to her. Moreover, Lin Yi had actually given her a lot of hints. The highest grade spiritual jade, divine sense transmission, and even the stories that he told her previously. At that time, she thought that he was just making it up. Now that she thought about it, what Lin Yi said was obviously a hint. It was just that she did not think in this direction because of her preconceived notions. Lung Lung's sudden attack caught Sun Baimei off guard. However, one was in the late stage of foundation building, while the other was in the early stage of foundation building. The difference in strength was too great. He did not take Lung Lung seriously at all. With one hand, he continued to raise his giant sleeve to suck in Lin Yi, while his other hand took the opportunity to throw the plastic board at Lung Lung. Although this thing was not sturdy at all, once it was wrapped in his vital energy, it was equally lethal. Bang! Lung Lung did not dodge. She took the hit head-on and spat out a mouthful of blood. However, at the same time, her kick landed on Sun Baimei's chest. Sun Baimei let out a muffled groan and took a step back. Just like when Lin Yi was fighting Fei Yangsheng, she chose to exchange injury for injury. You want to defeat me with such insignificant strength. Sun Baimei snorted coldly. After all, the difference in strength between them was obvious. Even if Lung Lung was unexpectedly tough, it was still too naive to think that she could defeat him just like that. Just like now, he was fighting against two people at the same time. Lung Lung was beaten to the point that she spat out blood on the spot, but he only let out a muffled groan. There was no injury on him at all. The difference in strength between them had already determined the result. However, Sun Baimei immediately realized that something was wrong. A layer of ice quickly formed on his chest where Lung Lung kicked. It would be fine if it was just ice, but the crucial thing was that the layer of ice disappeared as soon as it formed. It was replaced by a piercing chill on his chest. The surrounding area was frozen to the point that he lost his senses. Even his heart seemed to have stopped beating. Chapter 5049. Shattered Ice Physique. Lin Yi was taken aback when he heard that, and he couldn't help but look at Lung Lung with a little more surprise. He had heard of this physique before on Sky Class Island. It was said that this was a rare type of spirit root of ice. As one of the mutated spiritual roots, the ice attribute spiritual root was 1 in a million. However, this shattered ice physique was an anomaly among the anomalies. A normal ice attribute spiritual root could condense ice. It could be of great use in both attack and defense, just like Lung Rufen. However, it was different for people with the shattered ice physique. Although they could condense ice, the whole process was very short. Once it was condensed, it would melt immediately. However, one should not assume that the shattered ice physique was inferior to a normal ice attribute spiritual root. In fact, it was the opposite. Although it could not use the formed ice as an attack or defense move, it had another more threatening characteristic. When the crushed ice melted quickly, it would form a terrifying effect similar to instantaneous cooling. Just like Sun Baime at this moment, his chest was frozen to the point that he almost lost consciousness. If this characteristic was developed to the extreme, the horror of the shattered ice physique was almost immeasurable. Lin, he had always thought that this physique characteristic was just a legend. He did not expect to see it with his own eyes today. Moreover, it was Lung Lung whom he had been with for half a month. This discovery made Lin overjoyed. Lung Lung's strength in the early stage of the Foundation establishment stage was originally not much help. After all, she was injured. However, since she had the legendary shattered ice physique, even Sun Baime, who was in the late stage of the Foundation establishment stage, would face a great threat. Moreover, with the help of Lin Yi, their chances of winning were greatly increased. As expected, Sun Baime's face was a little more fearful. Last time, because of his sneak attack, Lung Lung chose to escape immediately after she was injured. Therefore, he subconsciously did not take Lung Lung seriously. He only realized it now that he suffered loss. Lung Lung's shattered ice physique was one of the top few powerful talents in the entire ancient underworld. She should not be underestimated. Fortunately, the opponent was only in the early stage of the Foundation establishment stage. If she was also an expert in the late stage of the Foundation establishment stage, he would definitely be dead after that kick. At this moment, Lung Lung was vomiting blood after being hit by his plastic board. She was injured on top of her injury and could not move for a while. Sun Baime did not hesitate to give up on Lin Yi and turn his attention to her. For his point of view, Cold's threat to him was already far above that of Lin Yi. He might even be frozen alive. As for Lin Yi, a mere primordial spirit would not be able to escape from his grasp. Sun Baime forcefully slapped his chest that had turned cold and stiff. He forcefully circulated his true chi and abruptly raised his other huge sleeve towards Cold. However, it was not an unparalleled suction force. Instead, it was 3 pitch-black sharp arrows that shot out soundlessly and abruptly. Lung Lung's expression changed when she saw that. She tried her best to dodge, but because of her injuries, she was not as agile as usual. She could not dodge at all. Fortunately, Linny blocked in front of her in time. In the time it took for a spark to fly off a flint, he consecutively launched 3 mad flame 1,000 kicks, and the 3 pitch-black arrows were all deflected. His quick reaction and accurate grasp of timing were simply unimaginable. White-browed Sun was dumbfounded. His cosmic sleeve arrow was a sneak attack technique that was used for sneak attacks. He never expected that someone would be able to withstand 3 consecutive arrows so easily, especially when it was just a primordial spirit. So powerful. Lung Lung, who was behind him, was also stunned. How many times have I told you? I'm a martial arts expert. Lin Yi turned around and chuckled. Although his strength was limited, whether it was his eyesight or battle experience, he was an existence that was comparable to the mountain opening period. It was a piece of cake for him to deal with the sneak attack of a mere foundation building expert. It could only be said that White-browed Sun had chosen the wrong strategy from the beginning. If he had relied on his level advantage and chose to fight the 2 of them head-on, even Lin Yi would not have been able to do anything to him. He did not have sufficient strength. No matter how good his eyesight was, no matter how rich his battle experience was, it was destined to be a decoration. However, he had chosen to play such a sneak attack. He was simply asking to be humiliated in front of Lin Yi. He would not even know how he died. She exchanged glances with Lin Yi. The shock and estrangement in Lung Lung's heart vanished in an instant. It did not matter if he was an ordinary person or a primordial spirit cultivator. After interacting with him for the past few days, the feeling was not wrong. Lin, he was still the same Lin Yi who brought her food every day. Bragging. Lung Lung pouted her lips as usual. Suddenly, a smile bloomed on her face. It was cold and beautiful. You're still bragging? Lenny couldn't help but smile as well. He was a little worried that the cold girl would have some bad thoughts, and that they might go their separate ways, but it seemed like his hard work for the past half a month wasn't in vain. This cold girl was unexpectedly understanding. Of course, although her injuries were not light, Lung Lung was suddenly in a good mood. If it was before, she would not have quarreled with Lenny like this. Two fellows who are about to die still have the mood to flirt? Do you really think that's all I've got? White-browed Sun could not help but fly into a rage out of humiliation. Hee, if you have any more moves, use them now. Otherwise, you won't be able to rest in peace if you bring them to the coffin. He smiled faintly. It was true that he did not have many ways to deal with white-browed Sun alone. However, he had Lung Lung, who possessed the shattered ice physique, to help him. As long as she could interrupt the suction move in time, white-browed Sun would be no different from an ordinary foundation building expert in front of him. There was nothing to be afraid of. You're just a primordial spirit cultivator. What's there to be arrogant in front of me? I was caught off guard last time. That's why you managed to escape. This time, I don't even need to lift a finger. You're dead for sure. White-browed Sun sneered. He then waved his sleeve abruptly. Lin Yi and Lung Lung were on their guard at the same time. One of this guy's sleeves could suck in primordial spirit, while the other could stab people in the back. Who knew if he had other dirty tricks up his sleeves? Meow, meow, meow. A strange cat's cry made Lin Yi and Lung Lung look at each other. Then, they saw the other's sleeves move, and a series of black cats came out one after another. Each of them was dripping with blood. There were 9 of them in total. These are all primordial spirits. Lin Yi's eyes focused. These bloody black cats were actually primordial spirits, just like him. Chapter 50-50. Blood Civet. Lin Yi's expression turned solemn. These 9 blood civet cats were slightly larger than a normal house cat. If it were not for the fresh blood on their bodies, they would not have been noticeable. However, Lenny could not help but feel his scalp tingle as they stared at him with their strange eyes. It was as if he was being stared at by a predator. Cats had always been mysterious and unpredictable. Civet was said to be born with the ability to communicate with spirits. These 9 blood civet cats were like ghosts that crawled out of countless civet corpses. They were extremely ferocious. If there were ghosts in this world, they would have been devoured by them in a matter of minutes. Lin Yi was no exception. The 9 blood civet cats surrounded Lin Yi in the blink of an eye. Their strange meowing was heard one after another. Not to mention Lin Yi, who was only a primordial spirit. Even Cold, who was a living person beside him, felt chills running down her spine. Get lost. Lung Lung was afraid that Lin Yi would be surrounded, so she immediately kicked at the nearest blood spirit cat. However, the blood spirit cat didn't dodge, and Lung Lung's kick went right through its body, as if she had kicked the air, without any effect on the cat at all. These blood civet cats of mine are primordial spirits. You're just a beginner of the foundation establishment stage. What ability do you have to deal with a primordial spirit? Do you really think you're invincible just because you have the shattered ice physique? Sun Baimei could not help but laugh. His expression turned cold as he said, Since I've released the blood civet cats, this primordial spirit is dead for sure. As for you, let me play with you. Upon saying that, he shot out another 3 pitch-black arrows from his sleeves. This was supposed to be a dirty trick that could not see the light of day. After using it so many times in a row, the other party would definitely be on guard against it. However, he was taking advantage of Cold's injury and inconvenience in her movements. Relying on this trick alone was enough to put the other party to death. Moreover, his chest was still icy cold at this moment. He really did not dare to exchange blows with Cold at a close distance. However, he was wrong about one thing. He was surrounded by 9 blood spirit cats. Lin Yi, who was supposed to be unable to protect himself, suddenly appeared in front of Lung Lung and kicked away another 3 black arrows. You really aren't afraid of death. At a time like this, you want to be the hero and save the damsel in distress. Aren't you afraid that my blood spirit cat will bite you to death? White-browed Sun mocked. Sure enough, When Lin Yi blocked the 3 black arrows for Cold with all his might, the 9 blood spiritual cats pounced on him at the same time. Their speed was even faster than Lin Yi's. In the blink of an eye, they pounced on Lin Yi's body, biting and scratching like mad cats. Lin Yi's face and body were instantly covered in blood, and the aura of his primordial spirit became much dimmer. Lin Yi, Cold was shocked to see this scene. From her point of view, Lin Yi's body was almost completely covered by the 9 blood spiritual cats. His flesh and blood were splattered everywhere, and the scene was extremely tragic. Cold rushed over with all her might, trying to chase away these blood spiritual cats. However, it was to no avail. Although these blood spiritual cats were primordial spirits like Lin Yi, they were not as solid as Lin Yi. If one wanted to touch them, one would not be able to affect them at all unless one had a special deific consciousness technique or a strategy to deal with them. Wahahaha! It's useless. You can only watch him get bitten to death. To me, as long as he's a primordial spirit, it doesn't matter if he's dead or alive. White-browed Sun laughed coldly. He had changed his mind. Since Lin, he wanted to be the hero and save the damsel in distress. Then he would wait for the blood spiritual cats to kill him first. There was no hurry anyway. As long as the 9 blood spiritual cats were summoned, no spiritual creature could survive in front of them. There had never been an exception. No. Although she knew it was futile, Cold Lungs still desperately tried to chase away these blood spiritual cats from Lin Yi's body. She could accept that Lin Yi was only a primordial spirit, but she absolutely could not accept that Lin Yi would die in front of her, especially in such a tragic way. Cry as much as you want. However, you don't have to worry too much. You'll be accompanying him in hell soon. I'll be merciful and let the 2 of you die together. Of course, I'll gladly accept the thing on your body. White-browed Sun crossed his arms and said. As he spoke, Lin Yi was already being bitten by the 9 ferocious blood spiritual cats. His primordial spirit was showing signs of instability, as if it could collapse at any time. The situation was critical. Cold Lung was futilely helping, and Lin Yi was also making his final struggle. He was surrounded by the 9 blood spiritual cats and stumbled everywhere. Unknowingly, he was only a short 3 steps away from White-browed Sunday. White-browed Sun did not seem to care at all. If it were not for these 9 blood spiritual cats, he would have to be wary of Lin Yi's strength. After all, he could easily be at a disadvantage at such a close distance. However, it was obvious that he was worrying too much. In his eyes, Lin Yi could not even live for a moment longer. How could he be a threat? At this moment, the 9 blood spiritual cats that were pouncing on Lin Yi suddenly started howling. Their howls were already terrifying, and now they were so shrill that it made one's scalp go numb. It was as if the howls came from hell. Strange. Why are the blood spiritual cats suddenly so excited? Is it because they swallowed this primordial spirit? White-browed Sun could not help but feel surprised. He did not mind giving some of his primordial spirit to the blood spiritual cats. After all, these were his trump cards. With the strength of this primordial spirit, he only needed half of it to break through to the golden core. He did not think that there would be any problems with his blood spiritual cats. These were ferocious creatures that were specially used to deal with spiritual beings. Lin Yi was about to be bitten into pieces. The only question left was how much primordial spirit he would have left. Other than that, there should not be any other accidents. Even so, the state of the blood spiritual cats was indeed strange. White-browed Sun felt a little uneasy and immediately wanted to summon one to see what was going on. However, before he could summon it, the 9 blood spiritual cats' shrill howls suddenly pierced through the sky. Then a violent flame suddenly burst out from their bodies. They were ferocious just a moment ago, but in the blink of an eye, they were burned to ashes by this flame. Dan fire. White-browed Sun spat out a mouthful of blood. These blood spiritual cats were connected to his primordial spirit ever since they were tamed. When the blood spiritual cats were burned to ashes, he naturally suffered a great backlash. Your eyesight is not bad. It is a pity that your reaction is too slow. Lin, he snorted coldly. He was right in front of white-browed Sunday. Two mad fire 8 trigram palms hit white-browed Sun's face. White-browed Sun was sent flying. Not only did his teeth fall to the ground, but even his face was clearly crooked. Chapter 50-51. Her face was full of tears. She thought that Lin, he would not make it. After all, the scene just now was too scary. No one thought that Lin, he could survive after being bitten by the 9 blood spiritual cats. She did not expect that it was all an illusion that Lin, he had deliberately created. The blood spiritual cats were indeed powerful, and they were the natural enemies of spiritual beings like primordial spirits. However, they were also spiritual beings, and they were extremely afraid of Danfire. Even ghosts could be restrained by Danfire, let alone them. "I'm fine," Lin, he said with a forced smile as he stumbled. "Really?" Lung Lung's expression changed when she saw how weak he was. She quickly tried to support him, but her hands were light. Although there was still some form of substance, it was obviously different from usual. Being bitten by the blood spiritual cats was a trick, but Lin, he still paid a heavy price. Now, his primordial spirit was on the verge of collapse, and it was very difficult for him to maintain his physical form. "I didn't expect you to be a lunatic primordial spirit. You obviously have Danfire, but you didn't use it immediately. Instead, you used the 9 blood spiritual cats to attack me. Do you really want to die with me?" Bai Mei stood up with difficulty. First, he was blasted away by the chi bomb, and now he was attacked by the blood spirit cat. He was even hit twice by Lin Yi's fire 8 trigram palms at such a close distance. The injuries on his body couldn't be any worse, and it was a miracle that he was still able to stand up. "Die with me. You overestimate yourself." Lin, he smiled with difficulty. As long as he could return to his real body on the heavenly island before his primordial spirit collapsed, he would be fine. As long as he did not want to die, no one in the mortal world could kill him. At most, his primordial spirit would be severely injured. "Really? Do you think you've won?" Sun Bai Mei suddenly clenched his teeth and forcefully raised his left sleeve. That incomparably powerful suction force came again. Even if Lin he was at his peak, it would be difficult for him to resist. Now that he was so weak, he had no way of resisting and was directly sucked in. Lin he was shocked. He did not expect this guy to still have the strength to counterattack, even at this stage. If he was really sucked into the other party's sleeve, he did not know what would happen. The safest way was to remove his Yuan Shen body. However, Lung Lung suddenly appeared in front of him. Although she could not move freely due to her injuries, she still gritted her teeth and launched a self-sacrificing attack. Since Sun Bai Mei was willing to risk his life, why couldn't she do the same? Sun Bai Mei's technique was specially used to deal with spiritual beings, such as primordial spirits. Even if it was effective against a normal cultivator like Cold Lung, its effectiveness would be greatly reduced. Moreover, it could only suck the person over at most. It was impossible to keep the person into his sleeve, so it did not have any substantial lethality. Not only was it useless, but it had also sucked Lung Lung closer to him at a faster speed. He was practically digging his own grave. Bang! 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 Lung Lung kicked his left arm, chest, and torso 3 times in a row. Sun Bai Mei's body was instantly covered in frost. The power of the shattered ice physique was vividly displayed at this moment. His entire body fell straight to the ground. Due to her injuries, Lung Lung's attack power was not strong. However, the cool-down effect of the shattered ice physique was fatal. It was not something that Sun Bai Mei, who was also severely injured, could withstand. Huff, huff. Lung Lung had exhausted all her energy. She half knelt on the ground and panted heavily. However, she still managed to support her body and got up. She looked at Lin Yi with a worried expression. At this moment, although Lin Yi had regained his balance, he had become weaker and more transparent than before. It felt like he could be blown away by a gust of wind. Soon, he would be no different from other primordial spirits. "Are you all right?" Lung Lung's cheeks were filled with tears. Even an idiot would know that something was wrong with Lin Yi's condition. His primordial spirit might be destroyed in the next moment. I'm all right. How can a man say that he can't? Lin, he forced a smile. He pointed at Sun Bai Mei and Fei Yangsheng with his lips and said, let's get rid of these two first. If we don't kill the snake, we'll be harmed instead. We can't afford to suffer the same loss twice. All right, wait for me. Lung Lung nodded. Although she was severely injured, she was the only one who could move at the scene. Whether it was Sun Bai Mei or Fei Yangsheng, they could not move at all. They had no strength to resist. Lung Lung walked over strenuously. Unexpectedly, Sun Bai Mei, who was supposed to be waiting for death, suddenly jumped up. This scene gave Lin, Yi, and Lung Lung a great shock. He could still jump up in such a situation. This guy was like an undying cockroach. However, Sun Bai Mei did not attack the two after he jumped up. Instead, he pulled Fei Yangsheng, who had fainted earlier. Both of them jumped out of the shattered window behind them. Lung Lung quickly chased after them to the window. However, she realized that the two of them had already fallen to the ground. They did not fall to their deaths or faint. Instead, they rolled and crawled as they escaped from the small district. The vitality of these two people is really tenacious. Lin Yi walked over with weak footsteps. He shook his head and smiled bitterly as he witnessed the scene. Whether it was Fei Yangsheng or Sun Bai Mei, they were supposed to die in his eyes. He did not expect the two of them to escape in such a situation. He did not know what to say. Do you want me to chase after them? Lung Lung knew the consequences of letting the two of them go. She could not care less about her internal injuries. She wanted to chase after them immediately. Forget it. Don't chase after a cornered enemy. Lin, he shook his head. He could consider it if Lung Lung's injuries were not serious. However, under the current situation, even if Lung Lung managed to catch up to the two of them, what if Sun Bai Mei still had the strength to fight to the death? Or perhaps there were other cultivators who were attracted to the battle during the time when they were fighting earlier. After thinking about it, the risk was too great. Hence, he could only choose to let the two of them go. All right then. Lung Lung nodded in agreement. She was not afraid that she would be in danger. The key was that she was worried about Lin Yi's current condition. She immediately urged, let's go back to the house. The wind is strong here. Are you really afraid that a gust of wind will blow me away? Lin Yi smiled bitterly as he was supported by Lung Lung back to the house. Although it was a little exaggerated to say so, in reality, he was not far away from this step. He could clearly feel that the divine sense connection between him and his real body was weakening. According to Steward Son of the Teleportation Hall, he must remove his primordial spirit and return as soon as such a sign appeared. Otherwise, he would be done for once the connection was completely lost. Tell me the truth. Can you recover from your injuries? Lung Lung looked at Lin Yi solemnly. Chapter 50-52. She wasn't an idiot. She didn't know anything about spirits, but anyone could tell from Lin Yi's current state that his spirit was only one step away from being destroyed. She couldn't imagine that a person who was not related to her would put his life on the line for her, especially when it was only a primordial spirit. It risked being subdued by Sun Bai Mei and being bitten to death by the blood spiritual cat. It stood in front of Lung Lung regardless of the consequences. Recalling every little detail of the past half a month, the softness in Lung Lung's heart was touched for the first time. What should I do? What should I do? Tears flowed from Lung Lung's clear eyes as she tried her best to get a cure from Lin Yi. She didn't understand these things herself, but she believed that Lin Yi, as a spirit, would definitely understand. As long as there was a way, she would save Lin Yi, even if it meant going through a mountain of blades or a sea of fire. It's okay, don't cry. Lin Yi smiled as he reached out to wipe her tears. This wasn't the time for romance, but he was still stunned by Lung Lung's tear-stained face. Some people said that women's tears were the most lovable, especially a strong and beautiful woman like Lung Lung. Even Lin Yi couldn't resist her killing power at this moment. How can I be okay? Lung Lung grabbed onto Lin Yi's hand, her tears still flowing. She really didn't know what to do. She could only wait for Lin Yi to give her the last straw. It's really okay. Listen to me. This spirit of mine isn't going to last much longer. That Bai Mei's son and Fei Yangsheng are heavily injured, but they won't give up. They'll definitely bring more people. You won't be able to last long with your injuries, and you won't be able to run far. I'll heal you first. Lin Yi said as he forced himself to sit up. At this point, Lin Yi knew that there was no turning back. He'd spent so much effort to project his spirit into the common world, but he didn't even get to see Ling Shan and the others before he died. This was a result he didn't expect, but he didn't regret it at all. He was never the type of person to regret. If worst comes to worst, he could go back and cultivate for a while, then ask Okuda to help him cast it again. Lin Yi's advantage was that his divine sense was far more powerful than an expert of the same level. Even if he lost a lot of it this time, as long as he recovered a little, it would not be difficult to imagine that he could reproject his soul spirit. However, he was a little worried about Cold Lung. It was impossible for him to completely heal Cold Lung's injuries in his current state. After all, even her primordial spirit had begun to become ethereal. It was very likely that it would collapse during the healing process. The only thing he could do now was to heal as much as he could and try his best to restore Cold Lung's ability to protect herself. No, Lung refused while crying. Although her injuries were serious, at least her life was not in danger. However, if Lin Yi were to heal her in his current state, she would only die faster. Listen to me, I don't have much time left. Lin Yi smiled bitterly. Don't die. Well, I do if you die. We haven't gone to get a room yet. At this time, Lung did not have the reserved manner of a girl. She could only use every means to save Lin Yi's life. Even if there was only a 1 in 10,000 chance, she would fight for it with all her might. However, if even Lin Yi gave up, then everything would be over. Get a room. Lin Yi was a little surprised and stunned. At the same time, he was also a little relieved. At this point, Lung's heart was completely tied to him. He was touched and said, "It's okay. Just tell me where you are. I will definitely find you. Even if this primordial spirit of mine has collapsed, I can still condense it again after cultivating for a while. I won't die." What he said was the truth. However, it sounded like a fantasy to Lung. After all, she did not even have enough understanding of the primordial spirit, let alone primordial spirit body and primordial spirit projection. In her opinion, what Lin Yi said was purely empty words to comfort herself. In order to let Lin Yi hold on for a while longer, she refused to let Lin Yi heal her injuries no matter what. Lin Yi had no choice. After thinking for a while, a 4th grade recover pill appeared in his hand out of thin air. After a slight hesitation, he took out a 5th grade recover pill and stuffed it into Lung's hand. He said, "The effect of the 5th grade recover pill is too strong. You may not be able to take it with your current condition. You should take the 4th grade recover pill to recuperate for a while before taking the 5th grade recover pill. This way, your injuries should be healed. Listen to me and run. Sun Baimei might bring people back at any time." Only the seriously injured Sun Baimei and Fei Yangsheng were not a threat to them. They would not be a threat in a short period of time. What they were afraid of was that they would find other experts of the Heaven Dao stage to help them in desperation. Under such circumstances, any expert of the Foundation establishment stage would make Lin Yi and Lung helpless. Lung looked at the pill in her hand and was instantly shocked. What kind of person was this? He actually had a 5th grade recover pill with him, and he just gave it to her so casually? One should know that a 4th grade recover pill was already very rare. As far as she knew, it was only available in the small ancient Jianghu. It was impossible for it to exist in the normal secular world. Of course, under normal circumstances, it was impossible for a monster like Lin Yi to exist in the secular world. A person who could materialize a primordial spirit that was comparable to a master of the Foundation establishment stage was unheard of. Who are you actually? Lung could not help but ask again. Even though she had accepted the existence of Lin Yi from the bottom of her heart regardless of his background and identity, she still had to figure out the answer to this question. I've told you before, I went to an island to learn martial arts from the secular world. I'm not joking. I'm telling the truth. Lin Yi smiled bitterly and shook his head. He did not have the time to let Lung Lung digest these things slowly. He could only say, "All right, let's not dwell on this first. Hurry up and eat it." "No, you eat it. I'll be fine after you finish eating." "I'm not eating anymore." Lung Lung shook her head resolutely. It was only now that she finally believed what Lin Yi had said last time. A real couple could indeed think of each other wholeheartedly. They could even give the most important thing to the other party without hesitation. Because that was how she felt right now. "It's useless. I'm a primordial spirit. These things are useless to me. Moreover, I won't die," Lin Yi said as he forcefully stuffed the 2 pills into Lung Lung's mouth. Otherwise, something might really happen if they continue to talk like this. Lung Lung was caught off guard. Her eyes widened instantly. She only regained her senses after she swallowed the pill with a gulp. She exclaimed in shock, "What a waste! How can you let me eat 2 pills at once?" Chapter 5053. It's not a waste. I have plenty of these things. Lin, he said as he took out a bunch of medicinal pills out of thin air. There were grade 4 recover pill, foundation building pill, foundation breaking pill, and so on. All of them were medicinal pills that could be used at Lung Lung's level. These were the stocks he had left behind when he was refining pills in the past. It was rare for them to come in handy this time. Lung Lung was dumbfounded on the spot. She stared blankly at Lin Yi and did not know what to say. Every single one of these medicinal pills was not an ordinary item. They were treasures that people would fight over in the ancient underworld. She had never even seen some of them before. Lung Lung could not help but feel puzzled again. What was Lin Yi's background? How could these precious medicinal pills be like free jelly beans in his hands? How could he take out a bunch of them just like that? While Lung Lung was shocked, Lin Yi channeled his vital energy into her body to resolve the medicinal effect before his primordial spirit completely collapsed. At the same time, he consumed a grade 5 recover pill and a grade 4 recover pill. He was afraid that Lung Lung could not hold on. He could only resolve the medicinal effect as much as possible so that he could rest easy. Feeling the warm, vital energy from Lin Yi's hand, Lung Lung was touched. At the same time, she was very worried. Lin Yi was obviously overdrafting the last of his vitality by doing this. She wanted to stop Lin Yi, but she dared not. She was afraid that once she interrupted Lin Yi, the consequences would be worse. The only thing Lung Lung could do at this moment was to cry silently. She wanted to turn around and hug Lin Yi. Even if she did not do anything, she wanted to stay like this until the end of time. Finally, Lin Yi retracted his vital energy. Lung Lung could clearly feel that Lin Yi had become weaker because Lin Yi's hand on her back was almost insignificant. She could not imagine what this meant. Lung Lung turned around abruptly and wanted to hug Lin Yi. However, she realized that Lin Yi was no longer behind her. Instead, a voice was heard from outside the window. "I'm leaving. You should leave too. We'll meet again soon." At this moment, Lin Yi was already in a semi-primordial spirit state and could almost float in the air. A light breeze could blow him far away. Lung Lung hastily pounced to the window, desperately trying to look for Lin Yi. However, she could not see anything. She could only shout, "I can only stay here for a year. My house is in Shenangjia. There's a small entrance to the ancient martial world. You must look for me there. I'll wait for you." Lin Yi didn't reply. When he heard this, he couldn't help but ponder. What kind of place was the primordial minor pugilistic world? However, on second thought, since the secular world had an ancient plane, it wasn't strange for there to be an even more ancient plane. It was just that this place was definitely isolated from the outside world. Under normal circumstances, it wouldn't affect the secular world. If it wasn't for the current situation, Lin Yi would definitely stay and ask Lung Lung about it. Unfortunately, he didn't have the time. What he needed to do now was to quickly disperse his primordial spirit and return to the heavenly stage island. Then, he would cultivate and project again as soon as possible. It wouldn't be too late to understand all these by then. There was no reply from Lin Yi, but Lung Lung didn't give up. She suddenly thought of something and shouted, "Wait! I have something good for you, too. After waiting for a moment, Lin Yi still didn't appear. Lung Lung had no choice but to say, I know you haven't left yet. I'll leave the thing here. Come and get yourself. Upon saying that, she carefully took out a small box from her inner shirt and placed it on the table. She pondered for a moment and said, I don't know if this thing is useful to you. However, Sunbai tried so hard to get this from me. He specializes in cultivating his deific consciousness. I think it should be useful to the primordial spirit. To Sunbai Mei, other than the ready-made and powerful primordial spirit of Lin Yi, the thing he wanted the most was the thing in Lung Lung's hand. To a certain extent, the value of this thing was even more precious than the ready-made primordial spirit of Lin Yi. However, this was a long-term consideration. If it was based on Sun Baimei's current level, the effect of Lin Yi's powerful primordial spirit would be more obvious. After all, he could directly break through to the Gold Core realm after devouring Lin Yi. However, the thing in Lung Lung's hand didn't have such an effect. There was still no sound of Lin Yi's voice. However, Lung Lung was very sure that Lin Yi had not left yet. She continued to explain, This thing was specially given to me by my master before we departed. He asked me to use it to consolidate my deific consciousness when I was in the secular world, in preparation for breaking through to the Gold Core realm in the future. This thing is very rare. My master has only one piece of it for many generations. It was only because I was one of the disciples who had the highest chance of breaking through to the Gold Core realm that he passed it down to me. Lung Lung knew that she had violated the rules of her master's sect. Although this thing was passed down to her, it was still a treasure of her master's sect. She had no right to give it away without the permission of her master. However, she couldn't care less about this now. For Lin Yi, she could give up everything, let alone this one treasure. After saying all these, Lung Lung waited for a moment, hoping to hear Lin Yi's voice. Unfortunately, Lin Yi still didn't show up. She knew that if she didn't leave, perhaps Lin Yi would never show up. I'm leaving. You must come and find me. Lung Lung cried out bitterly. She took a glance at the empty house before she left while clenching her teeth in tears. Lung Lung did not guess wrongly. Lin Yi did not leave just like that. Although his priority now was to dispel his primordial spirit and return to the Heaven Tier Island, he could only be at ease after he saw Lung Lung leaving this place safely. In fact, he was observing Lung Lung's every move in the room next door. It was just that Lung Lung herself was unaware of it. After Lung Lung left, Lin Yi walked back with weak footsteps. He saw the box on the table at first glance. Somehow, he was suddenly energized. He felt as if this thing was summoning him. There was always a great attraction in the unseen world. Could this be some kind of evil thing? Lin Yi was shocked. With his current precarious state, he couldn't bear any torment. However, this thought was quickly thrown to the back of his mind. If this thing was really harmful, why would Master Lung Lung pass it down to her? After all, there was no reason for Master Lung Lung to harm her disciple who had the most potential, right? Anyway, he could dispel his primordial spirit immediately if anything happened. Lin Yi carefully stepped forward and opened the box. There was a piece of blackish-purple thing inside. At first glance, it looked like a piece of coal. It didn't look special at all. However, when he got a little closer, he was suddenly shocked. There was actually an endless amount of divine sense energy inside. Chapter 50-54. If the ghost was not unconscious, it would definitely exclaim in surprise when it saw this item. This was the legendary star, Ink Charcoal. Even the Heaven Stage Island might not have it, but it actually appeared in the secular world. It was unbelievable. This was a peerless treasure used to consolidate one's divine sense, and it was an excellent auxiliary item used to break through to the giant realm. Only by obtaining this item could one have the chance to break through to the perfect giant realm. However, such a high-level treasure actually appeared in the secular world, and it was actually given to a mere Foundation Establishment Stage Master to consolidate his divine sense and break through to the Golden Core. If the ghost knew about this, it would definitely laugh its head off. let alone a mere foundation establishment pill. Even a nascent soul stage master's divine sense was not up to standard. Why would there be a need for the star ink charcoal? It was like a primary school student who hadn't even fully mastered the 4 basic arithmetic operations was suddenly given an advanced mathematics textbook and told that he could improve his grades if he did the questions on it. This was more than just bullshit. It was practically harming others. Once a primary school student really opened this advanced mathematics textbook, there would normally only be 2 results. Either the most basic 4 principles of calculation would be affected, or they would simply be frightened by the difficult advanced mathematics textbook and their entire person would become unwell. However, sometimes there would also be a third type of person who could still maintain their original heart after seeing the vastness and profoundness of advanced mathematics. Not only would they not be frightened, but they would also become more motivated and thus learn better and faster than others. However, this type of person was very rare after all, because they were the geniuses in the eyes of ordinary people. In terms of divine sense, a foundation establishment stage master like Lung Lung was a primary school student, while Lin Yi, a profound ascension stage master with an abnormally powerful divine sense, was at least a high school student. It was not too early nor too late to obtain the star ink charcoal. It could be said to be the perfect timing. Especially now that his primordial spirit was heavily injured, he needed to quickly replenish the divine sense energy. Only then could his primordial spirit be stabilized again. This star ink charcoal could be said to be a timely help. With the divine sense energy it contained, it was definitely more than enough to supply Lin Yi. Lin Yi was instantly overjoyed, and he immediately sat down cross-legged without the slightest hesitation before starting to absorb the divine sense energy within the star ink charcoal. If everything went smoothly, then he didn't even have to disperse his soul core and return to Heaven Stage Island, and he could directly recover here. This kind of thing couldn't be done and dare not be done by a foundation establishment expert. Not to mention Lung Lung, even Sun Bai Mei, who specialized in cultivating his primordial spirit, didn't dare to do it. Otherwise, this huge amount of divine sense would instantly destroy his primordial spirit. Even if he didn't die, he would become a fool. But Lin, he didn't care. As long as he maintained his original heart and didn't be greedy, he could completely refine this divine sense energy into a part of his soul. Of course, this process was easy to say, but it was actually very difficult and complicated to do. If it was possible, Lin Yi would definitely find a safer and more secluded place. But he couldn't care about anything now. Maybe he would collapse in advance before he found a place, so he could only stay in the room and take the risk. Originally, his primordial spirit was on the verge of collapse. It was unknown how long Lin Yi had been sitting there. It wasn't until he faintly felt a few auras that he was afraid of entering the small district that Lin Yi opened his eyes abruptly, and they shone brightly. Originally, his primordial spirit was on the verge of collapse, but at this moment, his primordial spirit had unknowingly become solid and thick again. Not only that, his whole body was emitting a threatening aura, and it had become even stronger than before. It's really a rare good thing in this world. This feeling is really not bad. Lin, he put away the star ink charcoal and exercised his fists and legs in a refreshed manner. He didn't care about the powerful auras that were constantly approaching him and continued to wait in the room. Through his divine sense, Lin, he could clearly sense that there were 3 people approaching. As expected, they were Sun Bai Mei and Fei Yangsheng. As for the other person, he was a cold-looking middle-aged man. The aura that he exuded was faintly similar to Sun Bai Mei's, and it gave Lin Yi the feeling that they should be the same kind of people. In the blink of an eye, the 3 people arrived at the small district. Sun Bai Mei and Fei Yangsheng's injuries seemed to have mostly recovered. As for the middle-aged man they found, his aura was slightly stronger than Sun Bai Mei's. He was an expert at the peak of the late stage of the Foundation establishment realm. Senior Brother Ian, I'm really sorry for asking you to come all the way here. However, I'm really in trouble, and I have no choice but to ask for your help, Sun Bai Mei said as he walked. Originally, with his and Fei Yangsheng's strength, a late stage of the Foundation Establishment realm, and a middle stage of the Foundation Establishment realm, it should be more than enough to deal with Lin, Yi, and Lung Lung. However, they suffered a great loss last time, and even almost lost their lives. Until today, they still had lingering fears when they thought about it. To them, Lin, Yi, and Lung Lung were simply suicidal lunatics. It was difficult for them to deal with these two people alone, and it was wishful thinking for them to escape unscathed, especially when Sun Baimei had lost the blood civet that he was so proud of. He had lost the most powerful method to restrain primordial spirit's spiritual items. Therefore, he was even more uncertain about facing Lin Yi. Therefore, after much consideration, he finally invited Senior Brother Ian. Although it was inevitable that Senior Brother Ian would get a share of the loot, he would at most share the primordial spirit of Lin Yi with him. As for the treasure that Lung Lung had, as long as Sun Baimei did not mention it, how would Senior Brother Ian know? You said in the letter that you encountered a powerful primordial spirit, and this primordial spirit could materialize, and its strength was comparable to the peak of the early stage of the Foundation Establishment realm. Senior Brother Ian asked seriously, with an indescribable excitement in his eyes. He and Sun Baimei were from the same sect, and the cultivation method they practiced was the same. Spiritual items like primordial spirits were of great use to Sun Baimei, and naturally, it was the same for him. Otherwise, why would he come all the way here? One should know that there was a competitive relationship between the two of them, both openly and secretly. They were not as close and harmonious as they seemed on the surface. That's right, and this guy's in cahoots with Lung Lung. Previously, it was the two of them who joined forces to ambush me and Brother Fei. Both of us were seriously injured, and we almost fell into their trap. Sun Baimei complained bitterly. Lung Lung, the legendary woman with the highest potential to break through to the Golden Core stage? Senior Brother Ian was stunned. He pinched his chin and asked, I heard that she's a rare beauty. Why would she be in cahoots with a primordial spirit? Besides, why would they ambush you for no reason? Chapter 50-55. There's such a thing? Senior Brother Ian was shocked. None of the primordial spirits that had the ability to take over someone's body were easy to deal with. No wonder Baimei and Fei Yangsheng were at a disadvantage. However, if that was the case, it proved that this primordial spirit was extremely powerful. If they could devour it, the benefits would be undeniable. It's absolutely true. So, Senior Brother Ian, you have to help us. Baimei and Fei Yangsheng acted as if they had been greatly wronged. Don't worry. With me here, what can a mere primordial spirit at the peak of the early stage of the Foundation Establishment realm do? Senior Brother Ian sneered. Spiritual beings like primordial spirits had always been hunted down by him. In front of him, primordial spirits were just food for others to devour. What could they do? Lin Yi, who'd been watching everything from his room upstairs, couldn't help but curl his lips at the words. This Sun Baimei really knew how to bullshit. Ren Zhongyan and the others he'd met before were all the same. Could it be that all villains were lying through their teeth like this? Was sowing discord their natural talent? After a while, Baimei and the other two arrived at the door. Without hesitation, they kicked the door open and saw Lin Yi lying lazily on the sofa. Yo, you're here. Lin Yi didn't even look at the three of them. He was watching the entertainment program on the TV. Speaking of which, he hadn't watched TV for more than 3 years. Now that he thought about it, it felt quite familiar. You didn't leave? Baimei was taken aback. He'd gotten Yin Shixiao's help this time, but he didn't have much hope of finding the two. After all, they'd been heavily injured last time, and if it were him, he'd run away a long time ago to find a safer place to hide. Why would he stay here and wait for death? He didn't expect this primordial spirit to really not leave. He was really stupid. Did he think that he could sit back and relax after making him suffer last time? Leave? Why should I leave? Lin Yi's eyes were still fixed on the TV. Without turning his head, he said, You can't be thinking that I'll be scared away by two losers, right? Stop fooling around. I still want to watch TV. If you talk big. You're indeed an impressive primordial spirit. I was right to come this time. Senior apprentice brother Yin's face revealed a fanatical expression. He was the same as Baimei Sunday. He was extremely greedy for any primordial spirit and had absolute confidence in himself. What about Lung Lung? He's not hiding, is he? Baimei's son searched around a few rooms, but he couldn't find any trace of Lung Lung. He was anxious. He was determined to obtain Lin Yi's primordial spirit, but he also had to obtain Lung Lung's treasure. After all, in the long run, the treasure's value was above this primordial spirit. Oh, she returned to the primordial minor pugilistic world. Lin Yi's tone was indifferent. What? That's impossible. The primordial passageway will only close after a year. Only a month has passed. How could she have returned so soon? Sun Baimei was startled. If he wanted to snatch that treasure from Lung Lung, this period of time in the secular world was his only chance. Once he returned to the ancient underworld, his chances would be slim. Especially if Lung Lung's sect knew about this, he might not even be able to protect himself. Primordial passageway? Lin raised his eyebrows slightly. He said what he said just now to test Lung Lung. He didn't expect it to be effective. However, what was the existence of the ancient underworld and the primordial passageway? Junior apprentice brother's son, it doesn't matter if Lung Lung escaped. Anyway, it doesn't matter. At most, we can go back and inform her sect to punish her. There's no need to be so calculative, right? Senior apprentice brother Ian interrupted. He didn't know about the treasure on Lung Lung, so naturally, it didn't matter to him. His target was the powerful, materialized primordial spirit in front of him. This, Baimei's son and Fei Yangsheng looked at each other. Since they had already lied, they didn't dare to change their words. They could only look at each other helplessly and nodded. It was better to deal with this primordial spirit first. As for Lung Lung, they could only think of a way later. Since senior apprentice brother Ian has said so, let's deal with this primordial spirit first. However, this guy can control alchemy fire. Last time, he burned my blood spiritual cat completely. Senior apprentice brother Ian, you must not be careless. Baimei's son reminded. This time, with the strength of the three of them to deal with a mere Lin Yi, the possibility of them failing was minimal. However, they had to be careful. Alchemy fire? A primordial spirit can actually control alchemy fire. This is really an anomaly. Interesting. Although senior apprentice brother Ian showed an interested expression, it was obvious that he didn't really take Lin Yi seriously. Their sect was an expert that specialized in subduing spiritual objects. Why would they be afraid of a mere primordial spirit? At this time, Lin Yi suddenly interrupted impatiently. You guys are so annoying. Can't you only watch some TV? Don't you have any civility? Fuck. Senior apprentice brother Ian and Baimei's son's faces darkened at the same time. They were just lucky to be tricked by him previously. This primordial spirit actually dared to take advantage of them. Did he really think that they couldn't do anything to him? Go to hell. Baimei couldn't help but attack first. Last time, he was at a disadvantage not only because he had Lung Lung, the troublesome woman with the ice-shattering physique, but also because he had underestimated his opponent. If it was a one-on-one fight, he didn't think that he would lose to a primordial spirit like Lin Yi. Moreover, this time, he had senior apprentice brother Ian, who was even more powerful, to support him. This time, he gave it his all. He used the universe arrow in his left sleeve and the spirit-keeping technique in his right sleeve at the same time. Although he didn't have the 9 ferocious blood spiritual cats, Baimei's power was unprecedentedly fierce. It was completely different from his previous style of waiting for an opportunity to attack. So fierce? Looks like you don't want to watch TV on purpose. Lin Yi sighed. If it was before, he would have to think twice before facing Sun Baimei alone, not to mention that his opponent had even more powerful helpers behind him. Especially in a situation like this, he might have to avoid Sun Baimei. After all, the spirit-gathering art in his right sleeve was already quite troublesome, not to mention the cosmos arrow in his left sleeve. However, today was different from the past. Although an expert like Baimei's son was still a threat to Lin Yi, the difference in their strength was completely reversed. Lin, he didn't have to act as if he was facing a formidable enemy like before. With a slight shake of his body, Lin easily avoided his opponent's universe arrow in his sleeve. In the next moment, he suddenly appeared in front of his opponent. He was so fast that it was impossible for his opponent to react. Chapter 5056. Then, it was a raging fire 8 trigram palm that was much more powerful than before. Bang! Sun Baimei fell straight to the ground. His face was charred black, and he died with his eyes wide open. The room was eerily silent. Senior brother Yin and Fei Yangsheng stared at Sun Baimei on the ground and did not react for a long time. After a long time, the two of them suddenly took a step back and looked at Lin Yi as if they were facing a formidable enemy. They gasped at the same time. Senior brother Yin was still fine, but Fei Yangsheng was stunned on the spot. Since when did this primordial spirit become so powerful? The peak of the late stage of Foundation Establishment Realm. How dare you lie to me? Senior brother Yin stared at Lin Yi and gritted his teeth. Sun Baimei clearly said that he was only at the peak of the early stage of Foundation Establishment Realm. How could there be such a huge difference all of a sudden? He himself was only at the peak of the late stage of Foundation Establishment Realm. No, I don't know either. He was only at the peak of the early stage of Foundation Establishment Realm. Otherwise, Brother Sun and I would not have been able to escape alive. Fei Yangxing stammered. Only half a month had passed, and he could not figure out why this primordial spirit strength had suddenly skyrocketed and reached the peak of the late stage of Foundation Establishment Realm. In fact, not only did they not think of it, even Lin Yi himself had never thought of something like this. It was just a piece of unattractive charcoal. Not only did it allow him to solidify his Yuan Shan, but it also allowed him to recover his strength so quickly. If he had known this earlier, he wouldn't have let cold go. Of course, Lung Lung would not have thought that the charcoal would be so useful. A treasure like the Star Ink charcoal falling into the hands of an early stage of Foundation Establishment Realm expert was like casting pearls before swine. If she really wanted to use it, she would at least have to wait until she reached the profound ascension stage. It was unknown if there was such a level of existence in the ancient small Jianghu, let alone advancing to the profound ascension stage with her own strength. Come to think of it, if there was really a profound ascension stage expert in the ancient small Jianghu, a treasure like the Star Ink charcoal would not have appeared in her possession. Perhaps even her sect did not know what it was. That was why they handed it to Lung Lung, a disciple in the early stage of Foundation Establishment Realm. This is all thanks to you. Lin Yi smiled coldly at Bai Mei's son, who was lying on the ground with his eyes wide open. No matter what, enemies like Bai Mei's son had to die. Not only Bai Mei's son, but Lin Yi's senior brother Yin also had to die. After all, they were natural enemies to Lin Yi, and there was no possibility for them to coexist. One arrogant essence soul. You can't be thinking that everything will be fine after you kill Junior Marshal Brother Son, right? Could it be that I, a peak late-stage Foundation Establishment Realm expert, am useless? Senior Marshal Brother Yin sneered. Their lineage specialized in restraining primordial divinities and the like. Normally, they could easily crush primordial divinities of the same level. Although a materialized primordial divinity of a peak late Foundation Establishment cultivator was no small matter, in his eyes, it was nothing more than that. He was even a little happy. Now that Sun Baimei was dead, no one would fight with him. He could have this powerful primordial spirit all to himself. This was something that he could not ask for more. We'll know who's the arrogant one after the fight. Hurry up, it's commercial time now. I'm anxious to watch TV later. Lin Yi glanced at him indifferently. Although the strength of the primordial soul was far inferior to the strength of the main body, and it was not as easy to challenge someone a higher level than the main body, it was not as easy as it was for the main body. However, if he couldn't even deal with an expert of the same level, then he wouldn't be Lin Yi. Courting death, senior brother Yin's embarrassment turned into anger. They were only 3 steps away from each other, and a short knife quietly appeared in his hand hidden under his sleeve. All of a sudden, it slashed towards Lin Yi. What kind of sect is this? All of you like to sneak attack and hide things in your sleeves. Nothing new at all. Lin Yi smiled faintly and dodged. Although his tone was relaxed, he was not careless at all. This senior apprentice brother Ian was indeed much stronger than Sun Bai Mei. His use of the dagger was like a ghost. Most importantly, there was a layer of faint aura on it. It seemed like it was specially targeted at primordial spirits' spiritual objects. The consequences would be unimaginable. Do you think you can escape from me? Senior apprentice brother Ian snorted coldly and immediately chased after him like a shadow. A mere dagger was used by him with a majestic aura, and his attacks were like a storm. For a moment, Lin Yi was in a precarious situation. He was like a small boat in a raging storm. It seemed like he could be destroyed at any time and die without a burial. However, what made senior apprentice brother Ian speechless was that even though he attacked with all his might for a long time, Lin Yi seemed to be not far from death each time. However, he was able to survive each time. Even when his crazy attacks were somewhat difficult to continue, he still couldn't hurt Lin Yi at all. This result was really depressing. It can't be. You can't hold on so quickly. It hasn't even been 3 minutes. As a man, don't you feel ashamed? Lin Yi saw that he suddenly stopped attacking and immediately mocked him mercilessly. You, senior apprentice brother, Ian almost spat out a mouthful of blood. He had indeed used all his strength just now, but this primordial spirit's speed was too ridiculously fast. Moreover, it seemed to be able to predict his movements in advance. Every time he should have been unable to dodge a sudden attack, his opponent would dodge it in advance. How could he fight like this? This couldn't go on. Senior apprentice brother Ian suddenly thought of the blood spiritual cat. What Sun Bai Mei knew, he naturally knew as well. It was just that he was afraid of his opponent's alchemic fire, so he didn't dare to use it easily. However, there was no other way now. If he wanted to kill Lin Yi, he couldn't rely on himself. He had to summon a few blood spiritual cats to distract him. As long as he could find an opportunity, he could easily tear this primordial spirit into pieces. With a thought, senior apprentice brother Ian immediately summoned 3 blood spiritual cats. Although they weren't as many as Sun Bai Mei, their individual strength was much stronger. If these cats were destroyed, he would suffer from the primordial spirit's backlash. Quality was more important than quantity. What are you waiting for? Aren't you going to attack together? At the same time, senior apprentice brother Ian scolded Fei Yangsheng, who was hiding in the back and watching the show. Oh, Fei Yangsheng responded weakly, but his feet seemed to have grown roots, and he didn't dare to move forward. He only made a pose from afar. Even Sun Bai Mei, who was in the late stage of the Foundation establishment realm, was killed by Lin Yi in one move. He, who was in the middle stage of the Foundation establishment realm, would only be cannon fodder if he came forward. Fei Yangsheng was well aware of this. Therefore, no matter how much senior apprentice brother Ian scolded him, he was only pretending. It was impossible for him to really risk his life. Chapter 50-57. Fei Yangsheng could not be counted on, but with the help of the 3 blood spirit cats, brother Ian was not afraid of what Lin Yi could do. If Lin Yi dared to use his Danfire against the blood spirit cats, there would be a flaw in his defense. If that happened, brother Yin's short knife would cut him into pieces. Brother Ian immediately commanded the 3 blood spirit cats to attack together. The room was only so big, and he thought that no matter how fast Lin Yi was, he would not be able to dodge the attacks. Unexpectedly, Lin Yi suddenly stopped. Yo, the advertisement ended so soon. I have to hurry up. Lin Yi glanced at the 3 blood spirit cats in front of him and smiled at brother Ian. You people seem to like cats, and each one is uglier than the last. But I am different. My pets are much better than yours. What did you say? Brother Yin's face changed. He thought that Lin Yi was bluffing, but suddenly he heard the low roar of a dragon. A flood dragon formed by the 5 elements' murderous chi appeared out of thin air. Without waiting for the 3 blood spirit cats to retreat, the flood dragon pounced on them and mercilessly chased after them. It killed one with its jaws, one with its claws, and one with its tail. The 3 blood spirit cats were killed in the blink of an eye. This was just an ordinary 5 elements killing chi, not the 5 elements 8 trigrams killing chi. However, it was a waste to use it against a cultivator in the foundational level. He could only use it now that his strength had increased. If he was still at the level he was at half a month ago, he would not have been able to use it even if he combined all of his Zhen Qi. See, the levels are different. If I want to have a pet in my next life, I will get one that is fiercer. That way, I can scare people. Lin Yi smiled faintly, and in a flash, he appeared in front of Yi Xiao. Because of the backlash from killing the 3 blood spiritual cats, Yi Xiao couldn't react in time. He was defenseless in front of Lin Yi, and Lin Yi's raging fire 8 trigram palms landed on his face, and he followed in Sun Baimei's footsteps. On one side was Baimei's son, and on the other was senior brother Yin. The 2 corpses looked exactly the same. When Fei Yangsheng saw this scene, he was so scared that he peed his pants. This time, he came to take revenge. Who would have thought that this would be the result? Watching Lin Yi getting closer and closer with an unfriendly expression, Fei Shengyang tried his best to turn around and run, but his legs didn't listen to him at all. His whole body was shaking like a sieve, but he couldn't move a single step. All right, it's your turn now. Lin Yi looked at Fei Yangsheng indifferently. Thump! Fei Yangsheng knelt down on the spot and kowtowed so hard that his forehead bled. He begged for mercy with a sobbing tone. Senior, please spare my life. Senior, please spare my life. I was forced by the 2 of them. I didn't mean any harm. Senior, please forgive me. Please spare my life. I'll do anything for you. I'm not from the same sect as them, and I never meant any harm to you. I was forced by them. Lin Yi was a little stunned. This guy was an expert in the middle stage of the Foundation establishment realm. How could he be so spineless? How could he kneel and beg for mercy in one go? How did he cultivate to his current realm with such a temperament? However, Lin Yi didn't plan to kill him directly. He wanted to learn more about the archaic underworld from this guy. He immediately snorted and said, "Answer a few of my questions truthfully. If I'm in a good mood, I might really spare your life. It depends on your performance." Yes. Senior, what do you want to know? I'll tell you everything I know. Fei Yangsheng was overjoyed. He didn't care if he would leak any information. As long as he could live, nothing else mattered. Very well. The first question, where did you come from? Lin Yi asked calmly. We come from the archaic underworld. The specific place is Shenanjia. There's a transmission formation there that is the archaic passage. However, that place can only last for a year. After a year, it will close. Fei Yangsheng was very honest. Lin Yi nodded slightly. In fact, Lung had already told him this answer before. It was just that she said it in a hurry at that time, so he was confused. Now that he heard Fei Yangsheng's explanation, he had a real idea. It turned out that the archaic underworld could only be reached through the transmission formation. No wonder the secular world hadn't discovered it. No wonder Lung said she could only stay for a year. After a year, the transmission formation would close. She definitely couldn't stay in the secular world anymore. The second question, why did you come to the secular world? Lin Yi continued to ask. This was also the question he wanted to know the most. Otherwise, he wouldn't have tried so hard to get close to Lung, and this series of events wouldn't have happened. It's because of the archaic sect training that happens once every 1,000 years. Every sect in the archaic underworld will send their disciples in the Foundation establishment stage into the secular world to train. At the same time, it's also to find new disciples for each sect. Although the spiritual chi in the secular world is thin, there are many people after all. Who knows? There might be some rare cultivation geniuses with spiritual roots. In order to please Lin Yi, Fei Yangsheng was willing to risk his life, spilling everything he knew without holding anything back. Lin Yi stared at his expression and knew that this guy wasn't lying. He was relieved. Since these people came out to train and look for new disciples, they didn't mean to break the rules of the secular world. Although it was inevitable that there would be people like spy Mei who didn't follow the rules. It would be fine as long as it wasn't an all-out conflict. The third question, how many people are there in total? What's the realm of the strongest one? Lin, he continued to ask. About 60 to 70 people. I'm not sure about the strongest one, but I heard that he's at the great attainment of Foundation establishment. At least the leading disciples of several sects are masters at the great attainment of Foundation establishment. That's for sure. These are all disciples who came out to train. As for disciples who are stronger than this, maybe there aren't, but they definitely haven't been publicized, Fei Yongsheng answered carefully. After all, he was just an ordinary disciple. He could only know the surface information that was widely known. As for the deeper inside information, he had no way to know. The great attainment of Foundation establishment. Lin, he frowned slightly. Although the strength of his primordial spirit couldn't be used to fight enemies of a higher realm, he should be able to handle them if they were at the great attainment of Foundation establishment. However, it was hard to say if they were masters at the Golden Core stage. After all, there was an essential difference between the Golden Core stage and the Foundation establishment stage. Chapter 50-58. Okay, the fourth question, tell me about Lung Lung. Lin, he continued to ask. Lung Lung had become one of his own now, so he naturally had to understand these things clearly. Fei Yongxing choked for a moment and said weakly, Senior, I don't know much about her. I only heard that she is very talented and is one of the disciples who is most likely to reach the Gold Core stage in the sect. I don't know anything else. He felt a little guilty when he said this. It was not because he was lying or hiding something in front of Lin Yi, but because he had a crooked idea about Lung Lung last time. If Lin Yi recalled his past at this time, he would be dead. In fact, Lin Yi did not have this idea at all. If he really wanted to kill Fei Yongsheng, he would kill him regardless of whether he remembered the past or not. Now that he said he would give Fei Yongxing a chance, he would not go back on his words. After listening to Fei Yongxing's answer, Lin Yi immediately fell into silence. These four questions were what he wanted to know the most now. Although Fei Yongxing's answer was not comprehensive and detailed, it still provided him with a lot of information. He had a general idea about the experts of the Heaven Path stage in the ancient small underworld. At least he was not as clueless as before. Only by knowing what was going on could he stay calm in the face of danger. For Lin Yi, there were too many things he cared about in the common world, and it was normal for him to worry about his personal gains and losses. It was because it was easy for him to get hurt, and so he treated all unknown factors as threats. If this had happened on Sky Class Island, Lin Yi wouldn't have worried so much. Fei Yongsheng, who was kneeling on the ground, was immediately frightened when Lin Yi suddenly fell into silence. He thought that his words had aroused Lin Yi's killing intent, so he hurriedly begged for mercy. Senior, please spare my life. Everything this lowly one said is the truth. I did not hide anything. Please forgive this lowly one and spare this lowly one's lowly life. Lin Yi did not know whether to laugh or cry. This guy put on a classic posture in order to survive. Lin Yi was embarrassed to kill him because he was so sensible. I've already said that as long as you answer my questions properly, I'll spare your life. I won't kill you today, seeing that you know what's good for you. Lin Yi said lightly. Thank you, Senior. Thank you, Senior. Fei Yongsheng was overjoyed. Ignoring his numb knees, he struggled to his feet, turned around, and ran away. He didn't dare to stay here any longer. However, before he could walk out of the room, Lin Yi suddenly said, Wait, how am I going to find you in the future? Why are you still looking for me? Fei Yongsheng almost burst into tears when he heard that. He didn't even have the time to hide from this fiendish monster. It wasn't easy for him to keep his life. Why did he still want to find him? Could it be that he still wanted to deal with him in the future? What? You're not willing? Lin Yi's face immediately turned cold. Feeling the ice-cold, killing intent emanating from the other party, Fei Yongsheng was so frightened that he burst into tears on the spot. He hurriedly said, No, it's my honor that Senior sought me out. How could I not be happy? If Senior wants to find me, you can go directly to Shenanjia. That's the gathering point for disciples like us who are training. Is that so? Linny glanced at him, not quite believing him. It's absolutely true. My life is in your hands. I can lie to anyone but you, Fei Yongsheng said hurriedly. He really didn't lie to Lin Yi, but it was hard to say what his intentions were. The Shenangjia gathering point was guarded by experts from various sections. If Lin Yi dared to go to that place, he would definitely die. There was no way for him to survive. That's good. Lin Yi nodded and then quietly left a divine sense mark on him. A weakling like Fei Yongsheng wouldn't be able to detect it at all. Of course, he had his reasons for doing so. Although this group of people from the immemorial underworld didn't have the intention to break the rules of the secular world, their existence was still a hidden danger to the secular world. If something unforeseen happened, who knew if they would become the enemy of the secular world's cultivators? Therefore, to be on the safe side, Lin Yi needed to leave a mole among this group of people so that he could easily grasp their movements. If Lung Lung was there, Lin Yi wouldn't have to do this, but now he didn't know where Lung Lung had gone, so he could only make an issue out of Fei Yongsheng, the coward. If something happened, he could call this coward out and scare him a little to find out the plans of this group of people from the ancient Jianghu. Seeing that Lin Yi slowly withdrew his killing intent, Fei Yongsheng finally breathed a sigh of relief. He hurriedly turned around and left, but before he could take 2 steps, Lin Yi suddenly stopped him. Wait! Plop! Fei Yongsheng's knees went weak, and he knelt on the spot. A dignified middle-stage foundation establishment expert was scared to tears by Lin Yi. He looked at Lin Yi pitifully and said, I really told you everything. Please spare my life, senior. Lin Yi was speechless. Looking at this guy's expression, he couldn't help but feel guilty. He pointed at the 2 corpses on the ground and said, These 2 people are an eyesore here. You can take them away. Don't forget that this was the mortal world, and it would be a big mess if 2 corpses were left here for no reason. Besides, the identities of these 2 corpses were unknown, and it would be troublesome if things got out of hand by accident. Yes. Fei Yongsheng finally breathed a sigh of relief. Unlike Lin Yi, he didn't care about the laws of the mortal world. He hurriedly carried the 2 corpses, turned around, and left, afraid that Lin Yi would stop him if he was too slow. He had been scared enough today, and if he was scared a few more times, he would definitely have a heart attack. After Fei Yongsheng left, Lin Yi quickly got up and left the room as well. Calculating the time, it had been a whole month since the projection of his Yuan spirit. Although the whole process was a little complicated, he barely achieved his goal. With his strength at the peak of late-stage foundation establishment, he could handle most things. It was time to return to Donghai City. Looking back at the room, Lin Yi couldn't help but sigh. Now that he was finally reuniting with Ling Shan and the others, he couldn't let go of Lung Lung. Although his intentions in pursuing Lung Lung might not have been pure, the 2 of them were undoubtedly together after going through so much. In Lin Yi's heart, Lung Lung was no different from Meng Yao and the others. They were all confident that he would cherish and treat sincerely in the future. Before leaving, Lin Yi couldn't help but sigh. It was a pity that he didn't expect this piece of coal to be so useful, or he could bring Lung Lung back to Donghai City today. Chapter 50-59. The reason why Lung Lung took the risk to stay at this place was because she wanted to find a chance to come back and take a look. After all, she had rented the house for a month. She wanted to see if Lin Yi was still around when the term was up, and if he had taken away her treasure. Of course, Lung Lung also knew that the possibility of Lin Yi being here was low. She was just holding on to a slim chance. However, before she could come back, she saw Bai Mei and the others who were coming back aggressively. Fortunately, she hid on the hillside and restrained her aura, so she was not discovered by Bai Mei and the others. However, she could tell from their movements that they were heading to the place she rented. Lung Lung was shocked on the spot. She could not help but worry. What if Lin Yi was still there? Although the possibility was very small, what if? Lung Lung wanted to come back and report in advance. Fortunately, her rationality won over her impulse. Putting aside the fact that Lin Yi was probably gone, even if Lin Yi was still there, it would be useless for her to go back now. She did not even have the ability to delay Bai Mei and the others. She might even be a burden to Lin Yi. Lung Lung suppressed the impulse in her heart. After waiting for half a day, she finally returned to her neighborhood. If she was not mistaken, Bai Mei and the others should have left by now. As expected, there was no one in the house. However, Lung Lung almost fainted when she saw the scene in front of her. There were obvious signs of fight at the door and the living room. Moreover, there were fresh bloodstains. Could it be that Lin Yi was... Lung Lung could not imagine it. She thought that it was impossible for Lin Yi to stay at this place after such a long time had passed. She did not expect such a thing to happen. If Lin Yi was really killed by Bai Mei and the others, she would never forgive herself. If she knew this would happen, why didn't she come earlier? She should have fought for some time for Lin Yi to escape, even if she had to risk her life. However, she reacted quickly. She was too concerned. If Lin Yi was a primordial spirit, where did the bloodstains come from? Lung Lung had witnessed the scene where Lin Yi was besieged by the blood spiritual cats. Although it was a tragic scene of flesh and blood splattering everywhere, these were just things that were condensed from the divine sense energy. They would soon dissipate into nothingness and would not leave any real bloodstains. After pondering for a while, Lung Lung felt that there were only two explanations for the bloodstains that had yet to dry. Either it belonged to Bai Mei and the others, or there was someone else. In any case, it couldn't possibly be Lin Yi's. However, it was unrealistic to say that the bloodstains belonged to Sun Bai Mei and the others. However, Sun Bai Mei and Fei Yangsheng were not to be trifled with. Coupled with senior brother Yin, who was even stronger than them, it was basically impossible for them to suffer a loss unless the senior brother personally came out. Could it be that some hooligans had come and were unlucky enough to run into Bai Mei's son and the others, and were then killed? Or could it be that the rent was due and the agent brought a new tenant to look at the apartment? Both of these hypotheses could be true. However, Lung Lung did not care about these. As long as nothing happened to Lin Yi, she would not care about the life or death of others. Lung Lung looked around the room and did not find her treasure. She did not know if it was taken away by Lin Yi or Bai Mei's son and the others. Hopefully it was Lin Yi. Looking at this place that she had stayed in for only half a month, but it had given her so many warm memories, Lung Lung was in a daze for a moment. The scenes from back then kept replaying in her mind. She even felt that someone was knocking on the door. As soon as she opened the door, she would see Lin Yi waiting at the door with breakfast. Unfortunately, such days were gone forever. She did not feel anything special at that time. However, now that she thought about it, it would be great if such days could continue. Lung Lung could not help but be in a daze. They had only been together for a short half a month, but Lin Yi had completely entered her heart. Every item that he gave her back then was now regarded as the treasure of her life. Of course, many of the things that Lin Yi had gifted her were priceless treasures. Those foundation-building pills and other medicinal pills, as well as the supreme grade spirit jade, were all priceless items in the ancient Jianghu. However, the thing that warmed Lung Lung the most was not these. Instead, it was the clothes that Lin Yi had accompanied her to buy, as well as the cell phone. The mobile phone. Lung Lung's eyes suddenly brightened when she thought of this. She had forgotten that the mobile phone could be used to make calls. If she wanted to know where Lin Yi was, she could just give him a call. Lung Lung immediately dialed Lin Yi's number. However, the voice that came from the phone made her a little disappointed. The number you have dialed cannot be connected at the moment. Please try again later. This was a matter of course. Lin Yi's mobile phone was simply thrown into the space of the jade pendant. How could there be a signal in the space? To be honest, Lin Yi had long been out of touch with the secular world after staying on the Heaven Stage Island for 3 years. He would only take out and use things like mobile phones when he felt like it. Usually, he would directly throw it into the space of the jade pendant. This was a habit that he had developed for a long time. No matter what it was, he would subconsciously throw it into the space of the jade pendant. After all, it was much more convenient than carrying it on his body. Moreover, he was now a primordial spirit. Every inch of his body was transformed from the energy of his consciousness. If he were to support an additional mobile phone, it would waste a lot of his consciousness. No matter how powerful his primordial spirit was, it should not be used so casually. However, Lung Lung was not aware of this. The time she had been in contact with mobile phones was very short. Moreover, she had only called Lenny before. She had never experienced a situation where the call could not be connected. Her first reaction when she heard the mobile phone notification was that her heart sank. Did something really happen to Lin? Recalling the words that Lin Yi said before they parted last time, Lung Lung really did not know whether it was true or not. She could not understand what Lin Yi said at her level. In fact, even Lin Yi's existence itself was already an unimaginable thing to her. Lin Yi said that he would not die and that he could come back after some cultivation. Could she believe these words? She hoped that these were all true. However, her rationality told her that once the primordial spirit was destroyed, it would be beyond redemption. This was the basic common sense in the cultivation world. As for whether Lin, it was an existence that was above common sense. Perhaps he was not. Nothing must happen to you, Lung Lung muttered as she clenched the mobile phone tightly. She looked around the room and packed up the clothes that Lin Yi bought for her before leaving immediately. She had never been a woman who would drag her feet. In fact, her temperament was much more decisive than most men. Chapter 50-60. If Bai Mei's son knew about this in the underworld, he would be so angry that he would come back to life. He had already died in the hands of Lin Yi. Why was he still looking for him for revenge? Did he want him to die a few times to be satisfied? Lung Lung was oblivious to all these. All she could think about right now was this matter. Lin Yi had left her a huge pile of foundation building pills and the like. With so many precious resources piled together, even a disciple with the worst aptitude could at least reach the foundation building full cycle. Lung Lung was naturally gifted, but with so many precious resources piled together, even a disciple with the worst aptitude could at least reach the foundation building full cycle. As she walked out of the room, Lung Lung turned her head to take one last look. The scenes of her meeting Lin Yi flashed across her mind. She was touched, but also a little sad. It was unknown whether Lin Yi was dead or alive. Even she herself did not know if what she said before was considered as a promise to marry Lin Yi. However, she knew Lin Yi's feelings. At least, she would never accept another man. If Lin Yi really could not get through this, she would rather be alone for the rest of her life. The memories of the short half a month were filled with warmth and sweetness. Lung Lung finally let out a long sigh and muttered to herself softly, "I hope he's as powerful as he said he was. Martial arts master, you can't brag this time, or I'll have to blame you for the rest of my life." In Shenangjia, Fei Yangsheng was dragging 2 corpses as he limped through the dense forest. If it was an ordinary person who did this, he would have been wanted 100 times in the secular world. Fortunately, he was a mid-stage foundation building realm master after all. Although he was injured, he still had the strength. Along the way, he had purposely used some tricks to deceive others. That was why he did not cause an uproar. Motherfucker, I should have stolen a plane and flown it. Fei Yangsheng casually killed a mountain leopard that was attracted by the smell of blood. He threw the 2 corpses on the ground while cursing. He then sat down on the side and panted heavily. Although he was a mid-stage foundation building realm master, his injuries were not light. Moreover, dragging 2 corpses through the deep forest of Shenangjia on foot was exhausting. The journey before was still manageable. Before entering Shenangjia, he had stolen an off-road vehicle and drove all the way from Shima City to the border of Hushi Province. Ordinary people would need to spend time to learn how to drive, but it was not worth mentioning for a powerful cultivator like him. Basically, as long as he was smart, he could learn it after a few glances. Therefore, it was not a big problem for him along the way. As long as he paid a little attention to avoid the traffic police, it was not a big problem. However, no matter how powerful an off-road vehicle was, it was impossible to drive into Shenangjia unless it was really a helicopter. Otherwise, Fei Yangxing's only choice was to walk. If he had not experienced the convenience of a car before, it would have been fine. Now that he was asked to do this kind of thing again, it was simply killing him. But then again, it was not a big problem for him to steal an off-road vehicle. The owner was knocked out and thrown into the ravine by him for a while. However, if he really went to steal a helicopter, not to mention that there was no such private helicopter for him to steal, and not to mention that he did not know how to drive it, even if all of this was not a problem, it would definitely be a sensational event. The government had already put him on the wanted list all over the world. How could they let him drive into Shenangjia leisurely? Therefore, this kind of thing was just a thought for Fei Yangsheng. Basically, it was not feasible. The only thing he could do now was to quickly drag the two bodies back to the assembly point and truthfully report what had happened before. This time, Sun Bai Mei and senior brother Yin, who died, were not ordinary disciples. One was at the late stage of the Foundation Establishment realm, and the other was at the peak of the late stage of the Foundation Establishment realm. They were both highly valued elite disciples. Originally, the secular world was just an easy and pleasant experience for them. It was not even a basic trial. This time, two elite disciples died in a row. How could it be? Fei Yangsheng did not even need to guess. When the higher-ups knew the whole story, they would definitely be furious. This time, the secular world must have a good taste of the so-called anger of the far ancient sect. Hee, that spirit is so arrogant and hateful. Next time, let's see how he will die. Fei Yangxing sneered. He stood up and dragged the two bodies over and continued to walk forward. With his own strength, he would definitely not dare to find trouble with Lin Yi. Revenge was even more wishful thinking, but it did not matter. His own strength was not enough, but the far ancient sect had many experts. Once he reported this matter to the higher-ups, how could they not be able to deal with a mere spirit? At that time, he did not even need to rush forward and attack. He only needed to watch from afar. One day later, Fei Yangxing finally returned to the assembly point with weak legs. It was the majestic mountain gate that they had all set off from. Basically, the big senior brother or the elders of each sect were stationed here. After all, there were too few cultivators in the secular world, and their strength was too low. With their strength, even if they went out, they would not have any value. Therefore, they were only responsible for the supervision here. When the bodies of Sun Bai Mei and senior brother Yin were thrown on the ground, the entire mountain gate was instantly shaken. In a short period of time, all the people stationed here had gathered. They had no choice but to come. This was an unprecedented event. Isn't that Yin Jiping and Sun Bai Mei from the evil warding sect? How did they die? The people from the other sects were discussing. These two are not weak. If I remember correctly, they were at the peak of the late stage of Foundation establishment. How could they die in a place like the secular world? Don't tell me it was done by one of our sects. Someone asked in confusion. The evil warding sect's way of doing things has always been strange. When they have nothing to do, they would often attack the spiritual beasts of our sections. It's very normal for someone to become enemies with them. Besides, there is not even a single Foundation establishment expert in the secular world. Who would be able to deal with the two of them? Someone gloated. That's true. We're the people from the evil warding sect. Don't tell me it's only the two of them. Wouldn't they have died for nothing? Everyone looked at each other. If the evil warding sect's higher-ups were here, they would definitely get to the bottom of this matter. But now, there was not enough of them. Most of them would have to leave this matter unsettled. Everyone here was the leader of the various sections. Their first concern was the benefits of their sections. If they found out that the two of them died in the hands of their own sect's disciples, wouldn't they be looking for trouble? What's going on? At this moment, a young and domineering voice suddenly rang out behind everyone. Although everyone here was the leader of their respective sects, when they heard this voice, they instinctively opened up a path. Strength determined one's status. Who asked this person to be stronger than all of them? Chapter 5061. Although there were also experts in the Foundation establishment Great Circle in the crowd. Even if they were in the same realm, it would still vary from person to person. This person's name was Shui Jianfeng, and he was an outstanding talent of a younger generation in the primordial underworld. He was publicly acknowledged as the #1 expert in Foundation establishment Great Circle. Senior Marshal Brother Shui. Fei Yangsheng quickly bowed. Seems like you know the inside story. Tell me, how did they die? Shui Jianfeng glanced at the 2 corpses on the ground. Although he had nothing to do with the evil warding sect, his ambition was to become the #1 expert of the younger generation in the supreme ancient underworld. This training in the mortal world was a rare opportunity for him to establish his reputation. He naturally wouldn't let it go. The others looked at each other. They were secretly angry at him for being a busybody, but they didn't dare to show it on the surface. They could only watch coldly. Senior Brother Shui, the 2 of them were killed by someone. It was an essence soul cultivator. Fei Yangsheng replied respectfully. Yuan's spirit cultivator? Shui Jianfeng and the others were startled when they heard this. They didn't understand what he meant for a moment, so they frowned and said, "Speak clearly. A primordial spirit is a primordial spirit, and a cultivator is a cultivator. What's with a primordial spirit cultivator? Could it be a hidden expert of some primordial sect? Even though I don't know where that person came from, I'm sure he's not from the primordial underworld. I only know that it's a soul, but it's a soul that can materialize, and it's extremely powerful. Brother Sun and Brother Yin weren't a match for him, and he killed them easily," Fei Yangsheng explained. A Yuan spirit cultivator that could materialize and easily kill a peak Foundation establishment late-stage expert? Everyone was completely stunned and frowned. An expert at the peak of the late stage of the Foundation establishment realm was not much weaker than them. Didn't this mean that even it might not be a match for that primordial spirit cultivator? There's someone like this in the mortal world? Shui Jianfeng looked at him suspiciously. This was completely beyond his understanding. He rubbed his chin and guessed, "Junior Marshal Brother Fei, could it be that you have something that you can't say? That's why you purposely made up this story?" Although he and Fei Yangsheng were fellow disciples of the same sect, they didn't have a deep relationship. In order to establish his own prestige, he, Shui Jianfeng, would not hesitate to place righteousness before family. Absolutely not. I, Fei Yangsheng, swear to the heavens that none of my words are false. Senior Brother Shui, please investigate. Fei Yangsheng was shocked. Seeing that everyone still didn't believe him, he started from the beginning. Bai Mei's son and I are good friends, so we traveled together. When we arrived at the mountains around Shima City in the mortal world, we ran into this primordial spirit master. Senior Marshal Brother Shui, you know that the Bai Cs sect likes these things, so I attacked him on the spot. And then, Shui Jianfeng's expression turned serious. He actually didn't believe that Fei Yangsheng would dare to lie to him in public, especially in such detail. The more detailed a lie was, the easier it would be to find flaws. If Fei Yangsheng really had a guilty conscience, he should have just brushed it off. At that time, this primordial spirit was still very weak, probably at the late stage of heaven rank. However, he had many tricks up his sleeves. Bai Mei's son and I spent a lot of effort to chase him, but he still managed to escape. After that, we kept searching for him. When we found him again, it was already half a month later. Fei Yangsheng continued. Go on, Shui Jianfeng said in a low voice. Yes, by the time we found that primordial spirit, his strength had increased greatly for some reason. He was already at the peak of the early stage of Foundation establishment. Furthermore, he seemed to have been prepared for our appearance. As a result, we were ambushed and both of us were injured. Fei Yangsheng didn't mention anything about Long Long. After all, it wasn't very honorable. Most importantly, this senior martial brother Shui Jianfeng had always been interested in Long Long. If he dared to say that he was interested in Long Long, he would be killed by a sword. Trash! Shui Jianfeng scolded in disdain. Bai Mei's son and Fei Yangsheng were at the late stage of Foundation establishment realm and the middle stage of Foundation establishment realm. Not only did they let him escape the first time, but they were also injured the second time. In his eyes, they were all trash. Ugh. Fei Yangsheng awkwardly pinched his nose and continued. After that, half a month later, we went to find that primordial spirit again after we recovered. We even called Senior Marshal Brother Ian from the evil warding sect. We didn't expect that primordial spirit to be at the peak of the late stage of Foundation establishment realm. Both of them were killed on spot. Luckily, I escaped fast enough. I only dared to go back and collect their bodies after the primordial spirit left. After hearing Fei Yangsheng's words, everyone was silent. Everyone looked at each other and didn't know what to say. There was no doubt about the authenticity of Fei Yangsheng's words. However, the sudden appearance of a primordial spirit master in the mortal world was really unbelievable. After a long time, Xue Jianfeng said in a low voice, "Junior Marshal Brother Fei, where is that primordial spirit? It was in Shima City before, but I don't know if it's still there now." Senior Marshal Brother Xue, what do you mean? Fei Yangsheng asked. Come with me. Although Yin Jiping and Sun Baimei are from the evil warding sect, they are part of the immemorial martial world. How can I allow them to be killed by an outsider? A debt of blood must be paid with blood. Xue Jianfeng snorted. As soon as he said this, everyone from the other sects looked at him. They couldn't help but show some respect. After hearing Fei Yangsheng's words, they had to think about it carefully. They didn't dare to be as decisive as Xue Jianfeng. No wonder he was the number one of the young generation in the immemorial martial world. This was exactly what Xue Jianfeng wanted. As long as he could kill this primordial spirit expert, putting aside whether he could obtain any heavenly treasures or not, just the reputation he could earn would be worth it. Ugh. Fei Yangsheng's face turned ugly. He wanted to let Xue Jianfeng and the other big shots to surround and kill Lin Yi, while he hid behind and watched the show. Who would have thought that Xue Jianfeng would ask him to lead the way? Didn't that mean that he would have to face that unfathomable primordial spirit again? Why? You don't want to? Xue Jianfeng frowned and said with an unfriendly expression, No, Senior Marshal Brother Xue. Look at my body full of injuries. If I don't treat them quickly, I'm afraid that there will be repercussions. Fei Yangsheng said with a bitter face. Chapter 5062. Not only Fei Yangli, but the people from the other sects also sucked in a breath of cold air. Sure enough, there was no comparison between people. Xue Jianfeng didn't even bat an eyelid and threw out a grade 4 great cyclic pellet. What a generous move. Yes. Thank you, Senior Marshal Brother Xue. Fei Yangsheng was overjoyed. A 4th-rank Great Recover pill was enough for him to recover in a short period of time. Although it was unwise to provoke Lin Yi again, there was always someone taller to hold up the sky. With someone as strong as Xue Jianfeng in front of him, what was there to be afraid of? Very good. Everyone, stay here and wait for this Xue's news. As long as this Xue is here, it won't be so easy to kill the people of our primordial underworld. Xue Jianfeng cupped his hands towards everyone and immediately left with Fei Yangsheng. As expected of Xue Jianfeng, everyone sighed in admiration. It was rumored that the ancient alliance that was formed by all the major sects in the supreme ancient pugilistic world was about to change. Although it hadn't reached the critical point yet, when that day came, someone like Xue Jianfeng would definitely be a popular rising star in the alliance. After leaving Shenangjia, Fei Yangsheng used the same trick and went straight to Shima City. However, when he and Xue Jianfeng arrived at their destination, the room was already empty. That Yuanshan cultivator must be afraid of our world's revenge, so he ran away. Senior Marshal Brother Xue, what do we do? Fei Yangsheng asked. What do we do? Of course, we have to find him even if we have to dig 3 feet into the ground. Xue Jianfeng snorted. He had boasted in front of so many people in the world, so it was impossible for him to return empty-handed. But that's a Yuan Shan, and he's no different from an ordinary person. Even Baimei's son and the others from the evil warding sect won't be able to find him easily. Senior Marshal Brother Xue, it's like finding a needle in a haystack. Fei Yangsheng said bitterly. Did I say I'm going to look for him personally? Xue Jianfeng glanced at him. Senior Marshal Brother Shui, you mean to ask the other disciples to look for him together? Fei Yangxing's eyes brightened. As long as they said that Lin Yi was the public enemy of the world, they would have a higher chance of finding him. Fool! How many disciples have come out to train this time? The secular world is so big. How can we find all of them? Shui Jianfeng looked at him as if he was looking at an idiot. Fei Yangxing couldn't help blushing. That was indeed the case. Who knew how long it would take to find Lin Yi in the secular world with just these few people in the ancient martial world? He could only ask weakly. Then how are we going to find him? Didn't you say that this primordial spirit cultivator is someone from the secular world? In that case, the secular world will naturally hand him over. Let's go. Shui Jianfeng smiled faintly. Where are we going? Fei Yangxing was taken aback. The Supernatural Investigation Bureau. It said that the cultivators in the secular world are under their management. A debt of blood must be paid in blood. We're here to seek justice. There will naturally be justice when we get there. Moreover, it's killing two birds with one stone. Shui Jianfeng had a disdainful smile on his face. Killing two birds with one stone? Fei Yangxing was confused. Seeking justice is only one of the reasons. As for the second, we can directly ask them for new disciples with passable aptitudes. It'll save us a lot of trouble, Shui Jianfeng said faintly. He was a radical to begin with. It could be said that he didn't care about the secular world from the bottom of his heart. The rules of the secular world, this time, clearly stated that the order of the secular world couldn't be disturbed. He actually didn't care about this, especially when it came to finding new disciples. Relying on just a few dozen disciples to train was undoubtedly an extremely stupid method. In Shui Jianfeng's opinion, the best method was to directly go to the Supernatural Investigation Bureau. After obtaining the information of all the cultivators in the secular world, they only needed to filter them one by one and pick out those who met the requirements of the primordial sect. Why did they have to go through so much trouble to act low-key? Although he was dissatisfied, this was, after all, the Primordial Alliance's rules. It wasn't good for Shui Jianfeng to openly violate them. However, it was different now. The deaths of Yin Jiping and Sun Baimei had given him enough reason to make a fuss. It was only natural for him to seek justice. At the same time, he could use this opportunity to ask for the new disciples, killing two birds with one stone. Yes, Senior Brother Shui is wise. Instead of wasting our time and effort, why don't we directly ask them for the new disciples? Fei Yangxing immediately nodded his head. This senior brother of his was truly an amazing big shot. He was really bold when doing things. The two of them immediately headed to the Supernatural Investigation Bureau's headquarters. This kind of thing was difficult for ordinary people to come into contact with, but for cultivators at their level, there was no such thing as a secret in the secular world. The Supernatural Investigation Bureau situation had long been clearly observed by the other disciples. It was just that due to the Primordial Alliance's rules, they only watched from afar and didn't recklessly barge in. When they arrived at the Supernatural Investigation Bureau's headquarters, Shui Jianfeng and Fei Yangxing got off the car and walked in. The guard at the side was shocked and hurriedly stopped them. I'm sorry, this place is off limits. The Supernatural Investigation Bureau wasn't like other organizations. There were no signs at the entrance. Plus, the place was relatively remote. Other than the internal staff, there wouldn't be any outsiders here. However, there would occasionally be some accidents, and the purpose of these guards was to stop outsiders. Fuck off. Shui Jianfeng didn't stop and only cursed faintly. For some reason, the guard actually knelt down on the spot. Fei Yangxing, who was following behind, sneered at this scene. This guard was clearly not an ordinary person. From the looks of it, he had the strength of a golden class. Unfortunately, in front of a perfected foundation establishment expert like Shui Jianfeng, a golden class expert was no different from an ordinary person. Old Wu, are you all right? A few team members who were passing by hurriedly surrounded him. They helped him up and joked, Old Wu, you're too polite. Didn't you just suffer some injuries during the operation? There's no need to kneel in front of everyone. Moreover, this isn't Chief Feng or Chief Song. Even if you kneel, he won't be transferred back to the team, right? Bullshit. I'll immediately return to the team when I'm healed. Old Wu's face darkened. Even he didn't know what had just happened. Perhaps his leg was purely numb. But when he looked at Xue Jianfeng and Fei Yangsheng again, there was some fear in his eyes. He said in neither servile nor overbearing manner, "You too, please show me your identification." Identification? Xue Jianfeng said with a condescending attitude. "I never need identification to go anywhere I want. I don't know what identification is." Chapter 5063. Facing this kind of rich second generation with such a powerful background, ordinary units would not dare to disrespect him. However, this was the Supernatural Investigation Bureau. Ordinary power in the secular world was useless here. Then please go back. I just said that this place is off limits to unauthorized personnel. Old Wu immediately said seriously. He was not an ordinary guard. He came from a proper action team and was someone who lived on the edge of a knife all year round. Once he got serious, he was also a ruthless character with a murderous aura. Off limits to unauthorized personnel? Do I look that free? Xue Jianfeng sneered. He ignored the few people and walked inside. Stop, or don't blame me for being rude. Old Wu frowned and shouted. Seeing that Xue Jianfeng and Fei Shengyang were still arrogant, he immediately raised his hand to grab Xue Jianfeng's shoulder. However, before he could touch the other party's clothes or see the other party move, he suddenly found that there was a huge bloody wound on his arm. Then, an incomparably intense pain rushed to his scalp. Even someone like him who had been specially trained could not endure such intense pain, and he immediately fell to the ground with a muffled groan. The few people at the side finally realized that the situation was not good. Other than one person staying behind to take care of Old Wu, the others immediately surrounded Xue, Jianfeng, and Fei Shengyang. At the same time, the Supernatural Investigation Bureau's alarm sounded. Almost all the remaining members rushed out. Xue Jianfeng and Fei Shengyang became the target of everyone. Who are you? How dare you barge into the Supernatural Investigation Bureau? Don't you know the consequences? Everyone shouted. Consequences? Xue Jianfeng laughed and said disdainfully, "It's just an unranked force in the secular world. I can do whatever I want. What consequences can there be?" Nonsense. Take him down. Everyone was instantly riled up. They released their aura and prepared to capture him on the spot. A bunch of ants actually dare to attack me. Aren't you afraid of death? Xue Jianfeng smiled coldly. Then he suddenly released the powerful aura of the Foundation building great perfection. Everyone from the Supernatural Investigation Bureau shrunk back. They were all extremely shocked. They looked at Xue Jianfeng as if they were looking at a monster. What kind of strength was this? This aura was at least a few hundred times stronger than the strongest heaven stage great perfection. A bunch of weaklings. Xue Jianfeng swept a disdainful glance at everyone. If it wasn't for the rules of the Archaic Alliance, he would have massacred this place on a whim. Killing people to establish his might had always been his style, unlike now where he could only use his aura to intimidate everyone. After all, this was the official faction of the secular world's cultivators. If he really destroyed the Supernatural Investigation Bureau, even if he did it in the name of seeking justice for Sun Bai Mei, the Archaic Alliance wouldn't be able to justify it. Thus, he could only suppress his killing intent. The people from the Supernatural Investigation Bureau did not dare to act rashly. Although they were not strong, they still had their foresight and experience. Although they had more people on their side, if they really fought, they would only be slaughtered. After all, the other party was too strong. Who was the person in charge here? Step out and say something. Xue Jianfeng squinted at everyone. Everyone looked at each other, speechless. Tianlong and Lingshan weren't here, and the highest-ranked person here was only a small captain. They clearly didn't have the right to talk to a super being like this. At this moment, a car stopped outside, and Lingshan walked out. She froze when she saw the scene in the headquarters. In the past month, because there was information about the activities of unfamiliar high-level cultivators everywhere. She, as the deputy director of the Supernatural Investigation Bureau, was simply overwhelmed with work. Basically, no matter where there were sightings, she had to personally investigate it. Although there was no detailed and accurate information so far, the number and strength of these unfamiliar high-level cultivators was really disturbing. She didn't expect to see something like this right after coming back. Logically speaking, as a Sky-class full mastery, she wasn't weak, but compared to Xue Jianfeng's aura, she wasn't even worth mentioning. They weren't on the same level at all. As shocked as she was, Lingshan was still a vice director. She'd had a lot of experience in the past few years, and her temperament and courage weren't something a normal person could compare to. She calmed herself down and walked in. "What happened?" Lingshan asked in a low voice. "Director Song, I don't know where this person came from. He just barged in for no reason." The injured old Wu reported. "You're the boss here?" Xue Jianfeng turned around. He had been acting all high and mighty, but his eyes widened when he saw Lingshan. There was actually such an alluring female practitioner in the world. She was so much stronger than those classical girls in the ancient pugilistic world. In fact, this was purely aesthetic fatigue. Just like how modern people would be shocked when they suddenly saw a classical beauty, it was the same for him, who came from an ancient environment, when he suddenly saw a modern beauty. This was a common characteristic of men. Not to mention him, who was at the peak of the foundation establishment stage. Even Aura's core stage experts and nascent soul stage experts were the same. There is no lack of beauties in the ancient pugilistic world, especially with someone like Lung Lung in his own sect. She wasn't below Lingshan at all in terms of looks, but their styles were completely different. "I am the vice director of the Supernatural Investigation Bureau, Lingshan." "Who are you, sir?" Lingshan asked, neither servile nor overbearing. She could tell that these two were the high-level practitioners that had been appearing recently, but their strength was simply too shocking. It was so strong that she couldn't accept it. The Supernatural Investigation Bureau had placed a lot of importance on this, even treating it as a top priority investigation, but they still underestimated these people's strength. Even the entire Supernatural Investigation Bureau combined wouldn't be a match for such a strong enemy. "Lingshan? Looks like the common world isn't completely useless after all. To be able to meet a beauty like Miss Song, this trip of mine has been worth it." Xue Jianfeng's attitude towards Lingshan was a lot warmer. He said faintly, "I am Xue Jianfeng from the Archaic Alliance." As he spoke, Xue Jianfeng purposely put on a nonchalant attitude. There was only Lingshan in his eyes right now. As far as he was concerned, as long as he revealed his identity, a beautiful girl like Lingshan would definitely bow down to him on the spot. The strong ruled, no matter where or when. This was a rule that would never change. Chapter 5064. Rumors had it that there was an even more ancient plane above the ancient plane, the primordial plane. This had always been a topic of discussion among the common practitioners, and while no one had ever been able to prove it, it was still a topic of discussion. In fact, almost everyone thought that the primordial plane was actually Sky-class island. After all, they were both higher planes in the legends, and the names didn't seem to conflict at all. So, they thought that Sky-class island and the primordial plane were the same place, just that no one had been there before. But now, after receiving the letter from Lin Yi, people like Lingshan knew that Sky-class island and the primordial plane were two completely different things. There weren't any primordial sects on Sky-class island at all, and the structure of the 5 islands was completely different from what they'd imagined. There were no 5-element sect, or everyday and everyday sect, and the similar named 5 elements commerce was created by Zhang Liju later on, completely different from the 5 elements sect. As for where the legendary primordial plane was, or whether the primordial plane even existed, this was an unknown that could not be verified. But today, this super strong master that popped out of nowhere was saying that he was from the Primordial Alliance. Lingshan's subconscious reaction was that the Primordial Alliance was just a small part of Sky-class island, and that was why Lin Yi didn't notice it before. After all, she couldn't think of any other place that had a master like this. You're from Sky-class Island, sir? Ling Shan asked. Sky-class Island? Shui Jianfeng was startled when he heard that. Then, he immediately smiled. He couldn't help but have a mocking expression on his face. You people of the secular world are ignorant. The Heaven-tier Island is just a rumor. How can there be a Heaven-tier Island in this world? The Primordial Alliance is the Primordial Alliance. Don't mix them up. Really? Ling Shan's expression turned weird. Lin Yi's letter had confirmed the existence of Sky-class Island. There was no doubt about it. This guy was saying that Sky-class Island was just a rumor. Did he really not know? Or was he pretending not to know? Of course it's true. I know that the highest level of the mortal world is the ancient sections. Our archaic alliance is an independent existence above the ancient sections. We stand at the peak of the cultivation world. What Heaven Stage Island? It's just a groundless rumor. It's just something that ignorant people fantasize out of thin air. Shui Jianfeng lectured high and mighty. Ling Shan could pretty much confirm that this guy really didn't know anything about Sky-class Island. She didn't expect the archaic alliance and Sky-class Island to be two completely different things. This was something that surprised her greatly. So you're saying that all the high-level practitioners out there are from the Archaic Alliance? Ling Shan asked without a change in expression. Not bad. They are all disciples of my Archaic Alliance who came out to gain experience in the secular world. As for their strength, although it doesn't count for much in the Archaic Alliance, it's already an untouchable realm for your secular world. The disciples who came out to gain experience are all Foundation establishment experts. Shui Jianfeng said proudly. A foundational master? Ling Shan, on the other hand, didn't have the slightest clue what he was talking about. They looked at each other, confused. What the hell was a foundational master? Oh, I almost forgotten. Your secular world doesn't have a concept of what a foundational master is. The Foundation establishment realm is a whole new realm above the Heaven realm, which is also what you call the Heavenly Tao realm. Shui Jianfeng's expression was like a city person looking at a country bumpkin. Heavenly realm. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air again. In fact, during their previous investigation, they had already discovered that the strength of these high-level cultivators was beyond common sense. However, because they did not directly fight with them, this thought was not strong. Many people felt that it was their illusion, and today, they finally got confirmation. These people were all heavenly realm. This result really frightened everyone and made them break out in cold sweat. Fortunately, they had restrained themselves and did not act rashly. If anyone had rushed up and grabbed them, they would have died. They wouldn't even know how they died. That's right. Foundation establishment practitioners are just normal disciples in our Archaic Alliance. Above them, there are even more powerful Golden Core cultivators and even the legendary Nascent Soul cultivators. Shui Jianfeng wanted to show off in front of Ling Shan, which was why he'd said so much patiently. Seeing the stunned expressions on everyone's faces, he said with disdain, "The common world is big, but when it comes to practitioners, you're just frogs at the bottom of a well. The things I'm talking about are things that you practitioners in the common world can't even imagine. Actually, it's a waste to tell you guys, since you'll never be able to touch these existences." Although they knew that they were being looked down upon, they still couldn't help but swallow their saliva. After all, what the other party said was the truth. The strongest experts that they could usually come into contact with were only at the peak of Heaven stage. They couldn't even imagine a Foundation establishment stage, let alone a Golden Core stage or Nascent Soul stage. Ling Shan, however, wasn't one of them. Other than not knowing about the Archaic Alliance, she'd learned about these realms from Lin Yi's letter. She knew even more than this. Listening to the other party's words, it seemed that Nascent Soul experts were the peak existences in the Archaic Alliance, but they were nothing in Heaven Stage Island. There were many experts above the Nascent Soul stage. It seemed that the level of the Archaic Alliance was much lower than Heaven Stage Island. Frog at the bottom of a well? He was probably talking about himself. He didn't even know about Sky-class Island, and yet he was acting like he was the number one in the Archaic Alliance. Wasn't he a frog at the bottom of a well? If that's the case, then the Archaic Alliance and us common practitioners should mind our own business. Then why are you here today, sir? Lingshan asked. That's true. Our archaic alliance has a rule that we can't disturb the order of the common world. Otherwise, with all these Foundation establishment practitioners coming out to train, your common world would have been in chaos long ago. Shui Jianfeng nodded high and mighty, finally getting down to business. We used to mind our own business, but things are different. We lost 2 disciples. What? Everyone was shocked. The Archaic Alliance was made up of Foundation establishment practitioners, and they were invincible in the common world. 2 of their disciples had died. Chapter 5065. Everyone nodded. Their first thought was that the Archaic Alliance was fighting amongst themselves. Who else could kill a Foundation establishment practitioner other than themselves? I know it wasn't you guys, but what about other people? You're not trying to say that the department is in charge of all practitioners in the common world, are you? Shui Jianfeng shook his head faintly. From what I know, there's never been anyone in the common world who's stronger than Sky-class full mastery. Saying that this has something to do with the common world doesn't make much sense. Lingshan said, neither servile nor overbearing. This wasn't a child's play. It affected the entire common world, and she couldn't just admit it so easily. Don't be too confident. Of the 2 people who died in the Archaic Alliance, one was at the peak of the late Foundation establishment realm, while the other was at the late Foundation establishment realm. It's true that ordinary cultivators from the secular world wouldn't be able to kill them. However, the murderer was an anomaly, a cultivator in the form of a nascent spirit. Since the Supernatural Investigation Bureau claims to be in charge of cultivators from the secular world, I believe you should have some files on this matter, said Shui Jianfeng confidently. A primordial spirit practitioner? Lingshan paused, and the others did as well. What's that? You guys really don't know? Shui Jianfeng looked at their blank faces, surprised. Even if you don't have accurate information, you should at least have some rumors about this practitioner, right? Nope, never heard of it. Lingshan and the others shook their heads. Shui Jianfeng couldn't help but choke. He could tell that they weren't faking it. No matter what, we Archaic Alliance disciples who died in the common world need to be accounted for. This primordial spirit practitioner needs to be investigated, and if you guys can't figure it out, then we'll have to do it ourselves. Lingshan's heart tightened at the words. It was obvious what the guy was implying. Things would get out of control once the Archaic Alliance started investigating this, and things would get out of control if they weren't careful. The practitioners of the common world would have to face a sudden bloodbath. After a moment of silence, Lingshan said solemnly, the department will investigate this primordial spirit practitioner. Since the Archaic Alliance has a rule of not disturbing the common world's order, then it's best to keep it that way. Very well. I believe in Miss Song's sincerity. Shui Jianfeng nodded and didn't have the slightest intention to leave. He changed the topic and asked, you say to the deputy chief here? I'll leave it to you to arrange a meeting with your bureau chief. I have something important to discuss with you. Chief Feng is not here. If there's anything, you can tell me directly. Lingshan said, neither servile nor overbearing. She wasn't trying to act all high and mighty by saying this. It was just that she had more experience as a vice director. No matter what Shui Jianfeng said, it would be easier for her to deal with it as a vice director. If it was Feng Tianlong, it would be a different story. There wouldn't be any room for negotiation. Sure, let's go somewhere else then. Shui Jianfeng looked around and said. What he was going to say next was his own decision. Before it was done, he couldn't casually spread it around. Otherwise, it wouldn't be good for the higher-ups of the Archaic Alliance to hear about it. All right, please follow me. Lingshan brought Shui Jianfeng and Fei Yangsheng to the meeting room and gestured for everyone to disperse. Both sides sat down in the meeting room, and Shui Jianfeng said proudly, our sect is recruiting a few disciples this time. As long as you have enough talent in the common world, you can come with me to the Archaic Alliance. Recruiting disciples? Lingshan paused. She thought it was some bad news, not expecting him to be recruiting disciples back to the Archaic Alliance. She let out a breath of relief. Strictly speaking, this wasn't a bad thing. Archaic Alliance wasn't on the same level as Sky-class Island, but it was still much stronger than the common world. But compared to the secular world, it was still much better. If there was such a chance, many practitioners in the secular world would be overjoyed. That's right. Of course, we're very strict when it comes to selecting people. Normal practitioners don't even enter our sites, but you, Miss Song, naturally meet the requirements. As long as you come with me, I'm sure you'll be able to reach Foundation establishment in no time. Even reaching my level isn't impossible, Shui Jianfeng said with a, "I'm taking care of you" face. As far as he was concerned, this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for the common world practitioners. After all, the path to the Archaic Alliance would only open again after 1,000 years. If they missed this chance, they'd have to continue struggling in the common world where the qi was thin. They wouldn't be able to advance even if they died. As long as one wasn't an idiot, they'd know what to choose between the common world and the Archaic Alliance. This girl he was drooling over clearly wasn't an idiot. Lingshan's reaction, however, made his jaw drop. She didn't hesitate at all. "I appreciate your good intentions, sir, but I've never planned on leaving the common world." If she really wanted to, she would have gone to Sky-class Island with Lin Yi. Why would she go to the Archaic Alliance? What? Shui Jianfeng thought he'd heard wrongly, frowning as he looked at Lingshan's serious face. "Miss Song, you might not understand the difference between the Archaic Alliance and the common world. Let me put it this way. With the qi and resources of the common world, Sky-class full mastery is the limit you can reach. It doesn't matter if you're talented or not, but if you come with me to the Archaic Alliance with the density of qi and resources there, you'll be able to reach the next level without a hitch. Think about the difference before you speak." As far as he was concerned, all practitioners would do everything they could to increase their strength, and some would even kill their loved ones for it. There was no way Lingshan wouldn't do something like that, unless she was out of her mind. "It's fine, I've thought about it." "Thank you," Lingshan rejected decisively. Seeing that Lingshan was a rare beauty, Shui Jianfeng purposely lowered his attitude, but now that he was rejected, his face darkened. "Miss Song, my sect is one of the top sects in the Archaic Alliance. With my help, you'll have a great training environment. This is something no one else can give you. This concerns your future, and it's best if you don't make a decision casually, or you'll regret it for the rest of your life." Chapter 5066. Lingshan couldn't help but frown. She'd already said that she wasn't going, so why was this guy still bugging her? Was everyone in the Archaic Alliance like this? She had to go if they liked her, and she couldn't even say no? Wasn't that a little too overbearing? "You don't have to make a decision in a rush. We won't be returning to the Archaic Alliance for a while anyway. You can tell me your answer the next time I come. I believe that Miss Song is a smart person, and you won't disappoint me." Shui Jianfeng put away his anger and smiled faintly. He also knew that he couldn't push her too hard. After all, going too far was as bad as not going far enough. He guessed that the reason why the other party rejected him was because it was too sudden and she wasn't mentally prepared. She might even have doubts about what he said before. When the other party figured out all these things, she would naturally know what to do. Lingshan didn't say anything, but since the guy had already put it that way, she couldn't go back on her attitude. She could drag this out for as long as she could, and she'd just reject him when the time came. The most important thing right now was to find someone to discuss a countermeasure with, just in case she got caught off guard by the Archaic Alliance. "I'll be taking my leave then. I hope Miss Song can think about this. Oh, right. Don't forget about the spirit practitioner," Shui Jianfeng said with Fei Yangsheng as he left. It seemed like he was surprisingly easy to talk to, but Jianfeng was actually taking a step back in order to advance. To be honest, he didn't believe that the department would be able to find that spirit practitioner. This way, he'd come back in a few days, and he'd be able to use this as a pretext. At that time, he'd just have to make things difficult for Lingshan, and she'd have to listen to him obediently. At the same time, he'd find some decent practitioners from the common world and bring them along. These people probably wouldn't have the guts to go against the Archaic Alliance, and they'd probably be overjoyed. After all, People like Ling Shan who rejected his invitation were rare. Ling Shan breathed a sigh of relief after the two left the department. The others weren't in the mood to do anything anymore, and they surrounded her to ask about the situation. Do your job well. After I report to Chief Feng, you will naturally know what you need to know. Ling Shan waved everyone away and called Tian Long, telling him everything that had happened. Tian Long was still out of town on a business trip and wouldn't be back anytime soon, so she could only contact him through the phone. Yeah, I've heard about the primordial spirit cultivators, but it's surprising that they want to recruit disciples from the common world, Feng Tian Long said after listening to the story. What do we do? Ling Shan asked. How about this? You arrange for everyone to focus on the Yuan spirit cultivator. Although this might be a lie, we still have to investigate it. We can't let them use this as a pretext, Feng Tian Long ordered. Yes, Ling Shan replied. As for the second thing, we definitely can't give them the information on the practitioners in the common world. If they have ulterior motives, the consequences will be unimaginable. But we can't just leave them be. We'll find some time to go through the list and do an internal screening. We'll pick out the ones with the highest potential, and we'll act according to the circumstances, Tian Long said after some thought. All right, I'll arrange it right away. Ling Shan hung up and gathered all the members of the investigation department, starting a targeted search for the practitioner. Everyone knew that the chances were slim, but they had no choice but to try as much as they could in a situation like this. After making the arrangements, Ling Shan didn't stay in the department and went to the villa in the Shueshang district. She had to report this to Qin Tian and the others. Qin Tian and the others jumped in fright when they received the news, dropping everything they were doing without hesitation. By the time Ling Shan pushed open the door, everyone was already there. What Ling Shan didn't know was that after she walked in, two figures appeared in the bushes not far behind her. It was Shui Jianfeng and Fei Yangsheng. With their strength, it was a piece of cake for them to follow someone in the common world. Even a sky class like Ling Shan wouldn't be able to detect them. Interesting, there's actually so many sky class masters in this place. Looks like this Ling Shan's background isn't simple at all. No wonder she rejected my invitation. Shui Jianfeng rubbed his chin with interest. The great circle of the heaven realm was already the peak of the secular world's strength, and a large number of them had gathered in this room. They were practically invincible existences in the secular world. Senior Brother Shui, should we go in? Fei Yangxing asked. Go in? What for? Capture them on the spot? We're here to recruit disciples, not kidnap. Use your brain. Shui Jianfeng glanced at him faintly. Some of them look quite talented. Let's write them down first. We'll just ask for them next time. Yes, Senior Brother Shui. You're the wise. With Senior Brother Shui here personally, these disciples will definitely be much better than the other sections. The head will definitely remember this, Senior Brother Shui, Fei Yangsheng said respectfully. Shui Jianfeng's face immediately became a bit more complacent. He didn't do this for the sake of making a contribution. More importantly, once he brought these disciples back, they would naturally become part of his faction. To an ambitious person like him, the benefits were self-evident. All right, we should get down to proper business. The Occult Investigation Department won't be able to find that Yuan practitioner by themselves. We'll need the people from the Archaic Alliance, Shui Jianfeng said as he left with Fei Yangsheng. In the villa, Ling Shan and the others didn't notice anything at all. After hearing Ling Shan's details, they all fell silent, worried. These people are all sky practitioners. This is a bit troublesome, Qin Tian frowned. Yeah, this Archaic Alliance popped out of nowhere, and it's completely different from Sky Class Island. These people aren't on the same level as us at all. We won't be able to handle them with our strength, Yu Bing said solemnly. Chapter 5067. If only Lenny Bro was here, he'd have a way, Ziyu said suddenly. That's for sure. With Boss Lin Yi's strength, that Shui Jianfeng isn't even worthy of carrying his shoes, and he's acting all high and mighty, asking sis-in-law Ling Shan to come with him. He's just asking to die, Kong Xiaobo said angrily. But we don't have a way to contact Lenny Boss right now. Even if we wanted to write him a letter, we wouldn't be able to get him to come back. Chun Tian smiled bitterly. Water from afar can't quench thirst right now. We can only rely on ourselves for this. Right? We need to tell Senior Lin Dongfang as well. Maybe he'll have a way? Chikuan slapped his forehead. Right. Everyone nodded. Lin Dongfang's performance last time had left a deep impression on them. Dealing with a couple of Sky-class full mastery was like child's play to him. Maybe he'd have a way to deal with this as well. Also, Sisenla Lingshan, the spirit practitioner you mentioned just now, it sounds like the Archaic Alliance came up with an excuse. But if it's true, we might be able to do something about it, Qin Tian said thoughtfully. What do you mean? Lingshan didn't understand, and the others looked confused as well. Think about it. This Archaic Alliance is coming at us aggressively, and with our strength in the common world, we have no way to fight back at all. Even if they have a rule that says they can't disturb the order of the common world, rules are dead, and people are alive. As long as one of them wants to disturb the common world, they could just find an excuse to do so easily. That Xue Jianfeng is the one doing it, isn't he? Qin Tian said. That's right. It's obvious that he's using this as an excuse, Lingshan nodded. Using the fact that 2 disciples of the Archaic Alliance had died as an excuse to barge into the Supernatural Investigation Bureau. Not only did he force the secular world to investigate, he even took the opportunity to suggest recruiting disciples with outstanding aptitudes from the secular world. He even wanted Xue Jianfeng to leave with him. It could be seen that Xue Jianfeng's focus wasn't on this primordial spirit cultivator. This was purely an excuse. So, looking at the big picture, it's not just us, but all the practitioners in the common world are faced with 2 choices. One is to submit to the Archaic Alliance's tyranny and do whatever they say, Chun Tian analyzed. Isn't that too infuriating? Lingshan and the others frowned. They weren't as strong as them, but this was the common world. What right did the Archaic Alliance have to call the shots here? That's right. It's infuriating. If there's pressure, there'll be resistance. It'd be fine if the Archaic Alliance chose to go easy on us. But if they find an excuse to force things, I'm sure most of the powers in the common world won't be satisfied, especially the ancient sects and noble houses. Yu Bing nodded. Since this primordial spirit practitioner can kill 2 of them, he must be very strong. I'm sure he'll be a threat even to them. That'll make things easier. Chikuan nodded. This was like a group of children suddenly appearing out of nowhere and being able to beat up the adults. Even if the adults still had the advantage, at least they wouldn't dare to be as unscrupulous as before. After all, if they really forced the other party into a corner, they would flip the table and get beaten up. You're right. Even if we can't find this primordial spirit practitioner, we still have Senior Lin Dongfang. At least we'll be able to hold the fort, Kong Xiaobo added. Chapter 5068. Lin, he wouldn't know whether he should laugh or cry if he'd heard this discussion, but he'd really have to give them a big thumbs up for their foresight. It had been 3 years, and Lingshan and the others had matured quite a bit. They were able to keep their cool in a situation like this, and their strategies were organized. They were starting to look like generals now. After the discussion, unless there was something urgent, everyone else stayed in the villa. This was a critical time, and it wasn't enough to just leave 1 or 2 people behind. They had to gather everyone's strength to defend the villa. After all, the Archaic Alliance's people were all Sky Dao practitioners, and any one of them would be powerful. Just a few of them alone wouldn't be enough. Lingshan, on the other hand, went back to the investigation department to look for the primordial spirit practitioners while discussing with Tianlong. They were preparing to form an alliance of the common world sects, and the first thing she needed to do was to contact the ancient sects and warn them not to get into conflict with the Archaic Alliance. At the same time, she wanted to test out what the alliance would be like. The reactions of the ancient sects were almost the same. Other than expressing their gratitude to the Supernatural Investigation Bureau for the reminder, they were somewhat ambiguous about the matter of unifying the front line. They also knew that at this point, Uniting was the best choice, but after all, it was a matter of great importance, and the sect had to discuss it for a while. The most important thing was who would be the leader after unifying the front line. In any alliance in the history of practitioners, fighting for power and profit was the mainstream. The investigation department was the best choice, and there wouldn't be much opposition from the common world or the hidden world, but these ancient sects were different. It was impossible to make them lower their heads unless someone as strong as Lin came out. Lingshan couldn't help but feel a little impatient. At this rate, she didn't know how long it'd take for them to form a united front, especially if the Archaic Alliance found out about this and split them up. That'd be even more troublesome. What Lingshan didn't expect was that the Archaic Alliance was already making their move before she even had the chance to sound out the ancient sects. What? Something happened to Snowy Valley? Chen Tian and the others were shocked. I'm not too sure about the specifics, but they said that 2 Sky Dao practitioners came to cause trouble, wanting to forcefully take away the talented disciples from Snowy Valley. They got into a fight, and many people from Snowy Valley were heavily injured. Lingshan said solemnly, "A Heavenly Dao Realm expert? That means he's from the Archaic Alliance. As expected, he's ambitious." Everyone was filled with righteous indignation. If something were to happen, she wouldn't be able to forgive herself even if she died 10,000 times. Actually, she was just overthinking things. With Shui Jianfeng's strength, it was extremely easy for him to follow anyone here. Unless she didn't come to the villa to meet with everyone, this was the inevitable result, and she couldn't be blamed at all. All right, since you're here, give us an explanation. Last time you said that you wouldn't disturb the order of the common world, but now? Don't tell me you don't know what your Archaic Alliance did to Shuigu? Lingshan said angrily. Linny smiled, not minding it. In fact, it was thanks to Fei Yangsheng that he was able to rush back in time this time. Originally, he would not have come back so quickly. On the way, he planned to use the spiritual sense energy of that piece of coke to restore his strength. However, after discovering that Fei Yangsheng had come to the villa through the spiritual sense imprint last time, he immediately knew that something was wrong, so he gave up on his plan to rush back as soon as possible. Who? Just who are you? Shui Jianfeng would be an idiot if he still didn't realize that he'd run into someone strong. The first 2 times he'd been able to use carelessness as a cover, but the third time was a different story. He had clearly dodged with all his strength, but an indescribably powerful and mysterious true qi suddenly pressed him to the ground, and even the true qi in his body was forcibly suppressed to the point of disorder. The key point was, he could vaguely hear a low and deep dragon roar. This result left him horrified. His opponent seemed to have the aura of a peak foundation establishment cultivator, while he was clearly the strongest peak foundation establishment cultivator in the Archaic Alliance. But in front of this person, he didn't have the slightest ability to fight back. Just where did this person come from? He couldn't possibly be from the mortal world, could he? Chapter 5071. Don't go too far. Shui Jianfeng held his right cheek, raging. His left cheek, which was the only part that wasn't damaged, was now green and red. He saw that Lin Yi was about to slap him again, and he quickly retreated 10 meters away. Luckily, the living room was big enough, or he wouldn't be able to escape. Go too far? You're the one who's going to steal my girlfriend, and you still have the face to say that? Lin Yi was amused at the look on his face. He crooked his finger. Come here, I promise I won't kill you. Oomph. We don't know who's going to kill who yet. Snow sword unsheathed, Shui Jianfeng roared, and a soft sword that was wrapped around his waist was unsheathed, piercing towards Lin Yi at a speed that was hard to see with the naked eye. The surrounding temperature dropped drastically, and everyone had goosebumps all over their bodies. Shui Jianfeng wasn't just for show, after all. His title as the strongest Foundation perfection practitioner in the Archaic Alliance wasn't just for show. Other than the difference in strength, he was also trying to numb Lin Yi's senses. Now that his qi was flowing smoothly again, he revealed his true strength. Ling Shan and the others were all shocked at the scene. This guy could actually control a sword from afar. This was a legendary skill. They all broke out in cold sweat for Lin Yi. Lin Yi, on the other hand, didn't feel anything at all. As long as the qi release was strong enough, controlling a sword from afar wasn't difficult at all. The sword technique was the deciding factor. Shui Jianfeng was just a Foundation perfection practitioner, and to Ling Shan and the others, he was nothing in Lin Yi's eyes. He'd seen Lu Ziyu's sword skills with his own eyes, and compared to him, this Shui Jianfeng wasn't even worth looking at. He wasn't even worthy of his attention. However, for some reason, Shui Jianfeng's sword technique gave him a feeling of déjà vu, as if he had seen it somewhere before. However, he couldn't think of a reason, and could only shake his head. The flexible sword pierced straight towards Lin Yi's face. If it was Lin Yi's original body, even if he let it stab freely, Shui Jianfeng's sword probably wouldn't be able to break through his Jinqi defense. However, Lin Yi was only a primordial spirit of Foundation Establishment Great Circle. Even if he had the upper hand in terms of strength, he didn't dare to be so careless. Lin Yi's figure flashed and reappeared. In an instant, he had easily thrown the flexible sword behind him. Then, he did not stop and directly pounced towards Shui Jianfeng, who was in the opposite corner of the wall. He raised his hand as if he was going to give him another slap. "Wait, aren't you afraid that I'll kill them?" Shui Jianfeng smiled viciously. He was still in the air, and while it was difficult to kill Lin Yi, if he were to change his target to Ling Shan and the others, he'd definitely be able to kill them all. Ling Shan and the others' faces changed when they heard that. With their strength, there was indeed no way they could dodge. All of them started cursing the guy for being shameless. You guys forced me to do this, refusing a toast only to drink a forfeit." Shui Jianfeng laughed coldly as he pointed at Lin. "If you really think there's something, you'd better kneel down and apologize. Who knows, I might let them go. Otherwise, He didn't expect that Lin Yi wouldn't care at all, slapping him in the face without hesitation, not forgetting to mock him. It's not wrong to have a low IQ, but if you have to come out and embarrass yourself, then that's your fault. This guy was a madman. Shui Jianfeng jumped in fright at the scene. He thought that Lin Yi wouldn't just let these women and lackeys be slaughtered. Even if it was just an act to win their hearts, he'd at least be able to find a chance. Who would have thought that Lin Yi didn't care about these people's lives at all? Fine, since you're forcing me to die, then I'll let all of them die with me. Shui Jianfeng gritted his teeth and swore. He tried his best to dodge Lin Yi's slaps, while controlling his flexible sword to start a massacre. But in the next moment, he suddenly froze. Where was his flexible sword? Bam! Without any suspense, Shui Jianfeng fell to the ground with another slap from Lin Yi. This guy was still searching for his soft sword with all his might, and finally found a pile of scattered metal shards on the ground. His mind went blank as he mumbled in disbelief. How did this happen? He'd been manipulating the sword from a distance, and the speed of the sword was so fast that it made one's hair stand on end. Lin Yi had only dodged the first slash, and then came straight at him. How did the sword break like this? Hard to understand? Such a normal sword technique, and you're playing with it from afar? I could just use a wave of killing intent to take care of it. This isn't your trump card, is it? Lin Yi curled his lips as he looked at Shui Jianfeng's soulless face. Shui Jianfeng spat out a mouthful of blood, furious and shocked. He'd suffered too much today. Why do I suddenly feel like this guy's a bit pitiful? Ziyu's lips curled up. He's kicked a metal board, acting all high and mighty in front of boss Lin Yi. Doesn't he know how to look at himself in a puddle of piss? Does he really think he can act all high and mighty in Archaic Alliance? That's like he hasn't seen the world. Serves him right, Chun Tian grinned. The others all laughed as well. It was indeed frightening, but Lin Yi dealt with it so effortlessly. Such a miraculous move made them all excited. Lin Yi smiled as well. It had been 3 years, and they hadn't changed at all. He couldn't help but feel emotional as he thought of the girls on the second floor. 3 years had passed, and he still hadn't found a way to cure them. His strength had increased a lot, but he still hadn't seen Zhang Liju. Chapter 5072. Since you're so dishonest, I'll have to be a bit more ruthless to keep you in line. Lin Yi smiled coldly as he stomped down on Shui Jianfeng, who screamed in pain. His entire body was in shock. Lin Yi's stomp didn't just cause him pain, it crushed his dantian. Even the strongest practitioner would be a cripple if their dantian was destroyed. Shui Jianfeng's life would be over if he didn't have some sort of miracle in the future. The cries of pain didn't stop, and even the security guards were alerted. Lin Yi picked up a piece of cloth and stuffed it into Shui Jianfeng's mouth, and only then did Shui Jianfeng calm down. He lay on the ground in despair, not moving an inch. There was no longer any of the confidence and arrogance he had before. Even his eyes were filled with despair. Dumb girl, get someone to bring him back to the secret investigation department and lock him up. Use whatever methods you need, and get as much information as you can about the Archaic Alliance. See what they're up to. There's no need to go easy on scum like him. Lin Yi turned to Lingshan. Oh. Lingshan was just staring blankly at Lin Yi, only coming back to herself when everyone's weird gazes landed on her. She quickly used the excuse of making a phone call to hide. You're a vice director now, but you're still so dumb after 3 years. Lin Yi smiled, speechless. His eyes landed on Fei Yongsheng. Fei Yongsheng was scared out of his wits. Yin Jiping and Sun Baimei had been killed by Lin Yi, and now it was Shui Jianfeng, who was even stronger than him. Lin Yi's strength was already deeply ingrained in his mind, and he couldn't bring himself to resist at all with his foundation intermediate stage strength. Mercy, Senior. I really had nothing to do with this. I was only forced to be his driver. I didn't do anything. Senior, please don't cripple me. I surrender. Fei Yongxing's kneeling posture was still perfect. His heart, on the other hand, was terrified. After all, Lin Yi had let him go last time, and now he was in Lin Yi's hands again. Even if he didn't do anything to Ling Shan and the others, who knew what Lin Yi was thinking. In fact, Lin Yi didn't intend to start massacre. Seeing that the man was so sensible, he nodded and said, All right, you can stay with me. We'll have to deal with people from the Archaic Alliance in the future. I just happen to be lacking an internal guide. Yes. Thank you for your mercy. Fei Yongsheng was overjoyed. As long as he could keep his life and his dantian, everything else was negotiable. Being Lin Yi's follower and guide was a little like defecting to the enemy, but the Archaic Alliance didn't have much higher standards for morality compared to the common world, especially when it came to something like his life and dantian. There was no need to make a choice. Shui Jianfeng was crippled, and Fei Yongsheng surrendering. This sudden storm had finally come to an end. Lingshan and the others finally had the chance to surround Lin Yi. Looking at these familiar faces, Lin Yi couldn't help but feel a surge of warmth in his heart. Starting from Lingshan, everyone gave him a bear hug, regardless of gender. To him, everyone here was his family. These 3 years, it's been hard on everyone. Lin Yi said emotionally. Boss, what are you talking about? This is what we should be doing. There's nothing hard about it. Chen Tian said. Yeah, boss, you're still treating us like outsiders? You're breaking our hearts. Yu Bing, Qikuan, and the others joined in. Fine. I said the wrong thing, all right? Who asked you guys to be on the same boat as me? You deserve to die from exhaustion, all right? Lin Yi raised his hands in surrender. That's more like it. Chen Tian and the others smiled. Lin Yi didn't know whether to laugh or cry when Ziyu suddenly came over and sniffed Lin Yi from head to toe. She frowned. Lin Yi, bro, what's that smell on you? You're not looking for women again, are you? Huh? Lin Yi paused. Seeing Ling Shan and the others trying to stifle their laughter, he realized that he was a Yuan Shan. How could he smell like that? He was almost tricked by this girl. The reunion didn't last long, however, because Ling Shan suddenly remembered the news she just received. She quickly told Lin Yi about what happened in Snowy Valley and how Mrs. Tang was injured. How dare you? Lin Yi was in a good mood, but he was furious after hearing this. Time is of the essence. I'm going to Snowy Valley right now. You guys wait here for me. All right. Everyone nodded. After seeing the fight between Lin Yi and Xue Jianfeng, they knew that they weren't strong enough to help. Lin Yi, on the other hand, would be able to do what he could if he went himself. Lin Yi was about to leave when he thought about it and went to the second floor to check on the unconscious girls. He felt their pulses one by one and breathed a sigh of relief when he realized that there were no changes. In a situation like this, the fact that there were no changes was good news. His main body was already a mystic ascension early phase, and once he became a magnate, Lin Yi believed that his chances of finding Zhang Liju would be much higher. Zhang Liju might be mysterious, but if they were at the same level, then their activity areas would overlap. Naturally, they would run into each other. He believed that as long as he could find Zhang Liju, the girls would be saved. Coming out of the villa, Lin Yi had Fei Yangsheng with him. He was still the driver, but he was driving for Xue Jianfeng, and now the boss was Lin Yi. What surprised Lin Yi was the fact that Fei Yangsheng's driving skills weren't bad at all. He didn't care about the traffic rules at all, but his speed was really fast. It was supposed to be a private car, but Fei Yangsheng was able to turn it into a super sports car, like he was on steroids. Lin Yi was speechless at the thought. But his driving style was to Lin Yi's liking. Lin Yi wanted to get to Snowy Valley as soon as possible. If this guy drove like a snail, he'd have to do it himself. This saved him a lot of energy. What's your relationship with that Xue Jianfeng? Lin Yi asked from the front passenger seat. Senior, he's the big disciple of our sect, and he's the one leading the training in the common world. I don't dare disobey him, and that's why this happened. Fei Yangsheng replied carefully. If the disciple's strength surpasses the peak of Foundation Establishment Realm and reaches the Golden Core Realm, then they will automatically be promoted to Martial Uncle. In our Snow Sword School, seniority is based on strength. Although the real master is still called Master in private, on the surface, if the disciple also reaches the Golden Core Realm, then they will have to call each other Senior Brother, Fei Yangsheng continued. This showed the difference between the archaic Jianghu and Heaven Stage Island. Golden Core Realm Masters were only intersect disciples on Heaven Stage Island. If one wanted to become a martial uncle, they had to be at least at the nascent soul realm. Above the Golden Core Realm, I heard that our Snow Sword School has nascent soul realm old monsters, but I have never seen them in person. As for the higher levels, I don't know. Fei Yangsheng looked at Lin Yi with eager eyes. This was all he knew. If Lin Yi wanted to ask more, he really could not do anything. Seeing this, Lin Yi's face immediately darkened. Watch the road when driving. What if you hit someone? Can you afford to pay for it? I can't afford to pay for it. Fei Yangsheng immediately burst into tears. Last time, when they passed by a village entrance, an old lady fell down dozens of meters away. She insisted that he hit her and would not let her go unless he paid for it. She even called a group of people from the village. He was a middle-stage Foundation Establishment Realm Master, but he was scared by a group of ordinary people. Thinking about it made him sad. They traveled as fast as lightning. When Lin Yi and Fei Yangsheng arrived at the Snow Valley, everyone in the Snow Valley was in a panic. The slightly stronger Heaven Realm disciples were almost all injured. On the contrary, the weaker disciples mostly escaped because they were not taken seriously. At this time, almost all the Snow Valley disciples were gathered in the small square. They all looked at the four people in front of them as if they were facing a great enemy. A feeling of despair and fear spread among them. It was no wonder that they were so helpless. Any one of these four people could beat all their strongest disciples. There was no way they could fight them. Have you all made up your mind? I've said it before, delaying any longer won't do you any good. As long as the disciples I've pointed out obediently follow me, nothing else will happen. It's obviously a win-win situation for everyone, so why bother asking for trouble? The leader of the group said arrogantly. Everyone in the Snow Valley was silent. The new Snow Valley head coughed out a mouthful of black blood. These archaic alliance bastards were not here to recruit disciples. They were clearly here to dig up the foundation of the sect. The disciples he called out were all talented and the sect's hope. If they were all taken away by him, the Snow Valley would be destroyed. They would never be able to rise again.